Call this meeting of James City County Board of Supervisors business meeting to order at 1 p.m. Ms. Stevens, you call the roll, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Mr. Hippel?
Here. All right, I need a motion to amend the agenda to add an item to the consent calendar for the ARPA Utilities Assessment Grant Program Memorandum of Understanding. Do I have-
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
So moved. Thanks, sir. Roll call, please, sir.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, our first presentation, recognition of the Friends of the WRL Book Nook Volunteers. Miss Sandy Towers, come forward. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you coming out today for us.
Thanks for having me. The Friends of the Williamsburg Regional Library Book Nook volunteers are a dedicated group of 30 to 40 community members who maintain an ongoing used book sale, the Book Nooks, in both library locations, the James City County Library and the Williamsburg Library. Proceeds from these Book Nook sales directly benefit the Williamsburg Regional Library. The number of volunteers varies depending on the time of year. Prior to COVID-19 limitations, these volunteers gave more than 6,000 hours annually to the libraries. This year's core volunteers are each donating between 10 and 20 hours each month. Since 2010, the Friends book sales in the Book Nooks and online have brought in over $1.15 million to the library, to support the library. During that same time period, the Book Nook volunteers have given over 51,000 hours of volunteer time. The work of the Book Nook volunteers ensures that the library can provide that extra margin of excellence that our community values so much. These volunteers sort through thousands of donated books, CDs, DVDs, and other items to price and prepare the materials. Each week, there can be up to 10,000 items donated to the Book Nooks. We have a very generous community.
Yeah.
These volunteers continually and tirelessly work for the good of the library and are some of WRL's best advocates. Friends, Book Nook volunteers have a work ethic that is nothing short of inspiring. They donate thousands of hours annually to ensure the Book Nooks run smoothly. In 2019, the James City County Library and the Williamsburg Library Book Nooks generated over $98,500 in revenue, and that's 1 year, to support the library. In 2020, the library was closed for a short time to the public. It reopened with some limited hours for a while, but despite these challenges, the Friends kept the Book Nooks in order, resulting in just $60,000 in revenue during COVID. So it was pretty impressive. As 2021 continues, monthly Book Nook revenues are nearly back to their 2019 levels, all due to the hard work and the dedication of the Friends Book Nook volunteers. So I'd like to appreciate you guys for recognizing their service to our community, and I'd like to call up some of our Book Nookers who are here in attendance. Terry Kavanaugh, who's our Book Nook coordinator for the James City County Library. Pat Van Zant, who's our Book Nook coordinator for the Williamsburg Library. Terry Johnson, who is our longtime Book Nook volunteer, and her husband, Jack. And Carl Lounsbury, who's our Friends of the WRL Foundation Book Sale Committee chair. So.
Would you like to do a picture with the board?
Sure.
Ask the board to come on down.
Sure. Carl, take this.
Oh.
He's over here.
Very, very fancy pins.
That's right. Oh, absolutely. It was a delight. I try. You go right ahead.
Technical difficulty.
Thank you.
I do
I put it back and it fell off again. Thank you.
That's right. Our next is our Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District Annual Report. Mr. Luck, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. Thank you, Chair Hippen. Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kinsman, and distinguished guests. I am Bob Lund. I'm one of two directors elected from James City County to represent us at the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District. We're here to provide a brief report about district efforts in James City County. Our annual report for fiscal year 2021 should be in your board package, and I welcome your questions both now and subsequently about anything that we do on behalf of James City County. And if we can't answer them immediately, we'll get back to you with answers as quickly as we can. The Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District, often referred to by its initials, is a regional effort, including James City County, that supports and encourages voluntary conservation. The Colonial District covers 825 square miles, is home to about 175,000 people, and currently employs 5 full-time staff members. The Colonial District continues to increase its urban and suburban role with homeowner associations, churches, schools, and homeowners, and other property owners. Supplemental funding from local governments and grants is necessary for the Colonial District to do more than implement the Virginia-funded Agricultural Cost Share Program. This map illustrates agriculture in James City County, with Mainland Farm in the center, a horse paddock to the left, and suburban development around both. James City has about 3,150 acres of cropland. The Virginia Agricultural Cost Share Program helps to defray the cost of conservation practices on farmland in James City and increased almost 40% from fiscal year 2020. Historically, most Colonial District funding comes via this program. Commonly supported practices are nutrient management plans, minimizing soil disturbance, and covering the ground with growing plants over the winter. Growing plants and prior crop residue hold topsoil in place, sheltering it from erosion. These practices reduce nutrient runoff into our watersheds. This reduction of nutrient fuel to our watershed in turn diminishes incidence of algae bloom, which can cause fish kills and be toxic, thus protecting both our farmland for future generations and our waterways for fishing and swimming. In our area, examples of necessary technical support no longer funded by the state are conservation planning to address Bay Act issues. While the programs highlighted on this slide were our major educational thrusts, the district also facilitated access to lower-cost camp experiences via forestry and youth conservation camps, provided technical support for community gardens, schools, and classroom conservation education, such as advising the Stonehouse Farm Club and the Rob Till Community Garden in Grove. The Colonial District provides a valuable conservation education resource with unique knowledge and tailored programs which complement other sources of conservation technical advice and education. The Colonial District created Williamsburg Community Growers under a charitable corporate structure and continues to provide both technical and grant funding support. Their community garden and teaching farm is located between the Williamsburg Indoor Sports Complex and War Hill High School. They educate the public regarding the benefits of producing and consuming locally grown produce, of conservation practices, and provide gardening space for individuals and organizations. Over the past 3 years, thousands of pounds of fresh, locally grown produce were donated to community organizations and low-income neighborhoods. Dozens of field trips and educational opportunities with local schools were facilitated. Locally grown produce was provided for farm-to-school cafeteria programming, and they helped demonstrate real conservation opportunities to protect our surrounding natural resources. Since 2017, interest in and services provided under the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program has grown every year and generated 87 more district site visits in James City, providing additional one-on-one conservation education and technical assistance. VCAP is for products complying with code they were built under. Supported practices redirect and or manage rainwater so it soaks into the ground, improving groundwater reserves or use by plants, thus reducing the volume of stormwater, which can cause floods, erosion, and pollution of our ponds, streams, and rivers. It focuses on smaller projects than James City usually does and can provide complementary cost share funds to programs such as the James City Clean Water Heritage Program. Limited state technical support funding constrains district VCAP efforts. The district is also a non-voting member of the James City Stormwater Programs Advisory Committee and provides technical advice on request as resources allow. Environmentally responsible lawn care includes applying the right amount of fertilizer based on soil test result at the right time of year and using irrigation systems efficiently to minimize wasted water. Limiting fertilizer to just enough improves swim and fishability by reducing nutrient fuel to our waterways, diminishing incidence of algae bloom, which can cause fish kills and be toxic. 3 district staff members are state certified in turf and landscape nutrient management. Turf Love participants receive a certified nutrient management plan specific to their lawn needs. Turf Love also hosts public education events throughout the year, focusing on general lawn care, improved soil health, appropriate watering, and the importance of nutrient management. A key objective of this new program is educating shoreline property owners about current or potential threats to their property and opportunities to help improve water quality. A visual inspection for problems such as erosion, other soil loss, invasive species, or lack of vegetation informs a report of issues and recommendations to the shoreline property owner. Turf Love advice and a nutrient management plan will be offered for any lawn. The Shoreline Evaluation Program will also help shoreline owners understand changed Virginia code establishing living shorelines as the preferred solution for shoreline erosion control, and opportunity for cost sharing under the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program. I want to thank you for James City County's support in both prior and current fiscal years. Despite a challenging environment, the district provided all program deliverables this past fiscal year and is on track to do the same this fiscal year. Participants and James City County staff are pleased with what the district provided. We request continued support for all 4 programs funded this year with the same funding and deliverables. We also ask for supplemental funding for the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program. We see an opportunity to accomplish more for James City County with VCAP by bringing still more state cost share funding to aid residents willing to install stormwater improvements but unwilling or unable to bear all of the cost. A key challenge with the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program is insufficient technical funding to adequately cover technical assistance to applicants, outreach, necessary training, and the 10-year inspection obligation. Potential of this program is huge given sufficient funding for technical support. The district continues to work with the program as available resources allow and continues to seek out and implement efficiencies. The Shoreline Evaluation Program is starting with a soft launch this fall. This continues our report. Are there any questions?
Questions?
Questions, but just appreciate the report very much and all the work. It's very important in this area especially, I think.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. You know, as I mentioned, we've got two of our staff people here, and you know, I've got to say, you know, we are most fortunate to have truly excellent staff, just like James City County. So thank you so much for your attention, and have a good day.
Thank you, Bob, and appreciate all your hard work and everything you've done, and tell the group as well, appreciate everything they do to keep our environment safe. Thank you, sir. All right, next we'll move into D, the consent calendar. Consent calendar, I'm not going to read them all, consent of 12 items. Is there any members wish to pull any items, or may I have a motion?
Move the adoption of the consent calendar,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman.
sir. All right, roll call, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next is the 2022 legislative discussion with legislators. Mr. Kinsman, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm happy to present to you your 2022 legislative program, copies of which are all with you. We also have our legislators here. If they can come on down, we've got red tables for you.
Yeah.
The hot seats.
That's right. They're just warm.
I spoke with the chairman. I don't think it's necessary for me to go through each and every one of them. I think you guys are looking forward to talking to your legislators. So if you have any questions, I'll stop back up. But otherwise, the floor is yours, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to the board and ask what they want to lead off with and which ones are important that they really want to pinpoint today, and ask any legislators. And I'd like to thank y'all all for coming. Appreciate y'all spending some time with us this afternoon, and I know your time is very valuable, so we'll try to keep it as short and sweet as possible so that y'all can get back to your daily jobs. Board?
If you don't mind, I'll
Yes, sir.
start out. Thank you all for coming. The only one I wanted to highlight was number 3, which is one that is near and dear to me in my district because I think Mr. Kinsman will tell you that we probably have more experience in James City County calling bonds than probably the rest of the Commonwealth combined. It's unfortunate that it happened that way, but I've got one in Newtown that has been ongoing for the better part of almost 20 years, and it's still not finished. We aren't able to get the infrastructure complete. We aren't able to get the roads over to VDOT. We have problems that we have difficulty getting interim fixes to because it's all tied up in legal proceedings. Mr. Kinsman, you may tell us that we are that close to a solution, but we've been that close to a solution for a long, long time. And I think the problem we've had has been the difficulty in the way it works now, because we are basically in a litigation ongoing, and it's taken years and years and years. The infrastructure that's been promised for our communities isn't complete, doesn't have any likelihood of being complete anytime soon, and it's led to a great deal of frustration on the part of our citizens and on the part of our board. I know that this is a touchy issue, but we're looking at it from if we're the problem in the state and not the statewide, maybe the way to handle that would be through our charter amendment. But the ability to focus the kind of surety we need so that when things do not go as planned, which we have had a lot of, we are able to finally recover. Ultimately, the way we're operating right now costs our citizens tax money and denies them the appropriate infrastructure and services to which they are entitled. So I would hope that we could find maybe some support to try to at least tackle this from a local perspective if we can. So that's just my two cents on that one. I'll let everybody else talk about the rest of them.
Next.
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. There are a couple. First of all, thank you for coming today to hear the concerns that we have as the General Assembly gets ready to meet again. There are a couple of things that I'd like to highlight, and the first would simply be we have an item in which we indicate a willingness to have some conversations relative to impact fees for development. And as you're well aware, currently we really have the opportunity to deal with proffers for the capital costs incurred by development, but only in cases where we're engaged in a legislative action or a rezoning of properties. And impact fees would allow us to recognize that whether new development is by right or requires rezoning, it still has an impact on the costs of providing facilities for the new residents and the new construction that's occurring. And I think that it's clear that there's an interest among communities like ours that are growing at a fairly rapid rate to figure out ways to ameliorate the impact of that development on the residents who are currently here, who have already invested very significantly in the costs of providing schools and other facilities for the public at large. But we want to make sure that if we find interest in advancing impact fees, that the fees are realistic, that they actually do take into account the cost of providing those new facilities and capital investments by the county. So I guess what I would ask by and large is, as you may be aware, I chair a group called the Coalition of High Growth Communities that represents about 24 fast-growing communities across the Commonwealth. And we've been very interested in looking at this question of impact fees, but not if those impact fees are set at a rate that is inadequate to provide real assistance in terms of addressing the costs. So I'd hope that as the General Assembly may look at this kind of question, that we'd have an opportunity to weigh in on what is an appropriate level of support. A second item that I'd point to is simply in terms of the cost of public education, which, as we know, is an issue that always generates a lot of concern among local governments. We obviously have a community that is relatively affluent compared to many others across the Commonwealth, but we also do have significant needs, and we know that there are extra demands placed on our school system, in part because of the high expectations of our community, and in part because we're viewed as an excellent school system that attracts people from other places to take advantage of additional services that are beyond the basic services provided by the schools. And it's fairly evident that over time, the state's level of support for education has lagged behind what local governments have been expected to contribute as a general rule. The state per capita spending on schools is in the bottom half of the country, while our schools overall are about the middle, and that does suggest that it's localities that are picking up some additional part of the cost of providing quality public education. And so obviously we'd be very interested in encouraging the General Assembly to increase funding for public education so that some of that burden is shifted to a broader level. And I'd also just mention that there are other programs that we would certainly strongly encourage the General Assembly to consider. There's a kind of laundry list of areas in which we are looking for help from the state government in terms of providing additional funding for mental and behavioral health, for a number of important environmental concerns, for our libraries and the like. In particular, I'd just like to highlight two that relate to the environment. The SLAF funding has been something that James City County has been able to take advantage of significantly in the last few years. The state local stormwater local assistance funding, which helps our community address some of the very significant issues that we deal with in terms of stormwater, and the legislation that was sponsored by Senator Barker last year that provided for funding for reforestation which again, we feel would make a real difference in terms of our ability to help mitigate the impact of development by adding additional or reseeding, if you will, forest land and land that's no longer in active development, so that we can again reduce the runoff that has been plaguing a lot of communities recently, and to also address the ability of that reforestation to assist in addressing climate change issues. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And congratulations to Delegate Batten and Delegate Mullen on your reelection. And election season is never easy, so I'm sure you haven't gotten a lot of sleep or caught up on all your email yet. I'll just start with something that I heard at VACO, which one of my colleagues at VACO was repeating several times last week, because there was a lot of discussion about the fact that the state has a surplus. And I thought this was a pretty good way. There's no surplus if you haven't paid all your bills. And there's certainly not been all the bills paid. So we'd really appreciate it if the bills could be paid, and then see if there's any surplus. I would just go and also mention public education. We have a new administration that's coming in that has some ideas and goals, and I would just ask that you keep in mind that first we fully fund public education before we move on to things such as school choice. I'm not against school choice, but I'm against school choice until we have fully funded our own public education system. So I hope that is something that you will look at. We've worked really hard to do a one-pager, or I should say Adam's worked really hard to do a one-pager so that we didn't overwhelm you all. VACO's is a little larger, but so we hope that something can be picked up. This is things that are very important to us and that we know that we need to see on our county. And then the only other that I will offer is if we would encourage the General Assembly to vote against any bill that would eliminate or otherwise reduce the official immunity of police officers. This is something that is very concerning for us and for our police officers, as you can imagine. So we would ask your help with that. And then I did tell a little bit. I will just tell you that we are seeing some good trajectory that was made possible by Senate Bill 942. We have the sales tax, and we are back almost to 2019 numbers, which, considering we have had no travelers from overseas, we have no group business. This is all leisure. We are seeing that we've been able to make a difference in the tourism market, but of course we hope for continued support. Tourism, we know, is a huge part of our economy. We know that even more after the impact that it's had on COVID. So any efforts that you can make in that arena for us is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Well, I will follow up with continued thanks for you all being here today, and congratulations on your reelection. I'll just reiterate what Supervisor Larson had to say, in that we do encourage the General Assembly to vote against any bills that would eliminate, otherwise reduce the official immunity of our police officers. So that was of the utmost importance on my list. So I'll just chime in with that reiteration, and thank you for bringing that up. Thanks again for being here. We appreciate all that you do to serve. Appreciate you.
And of course, we're trying to touch on, keep it as tight as possible, but we tried to bring the list down as far as we could. A lot of times we'll have 3 or 4 pages, and so Adam worked with us to bring it down. And of course, we'd love to have everything, that we're asking for, but no funds are limited, and just like our funds with what we can do. But our stormwater local assistance program that John was talking about earlier has helped us a lot in James City County. And if you're reading the Daily Press this morning, you see where York County's building, and their stream that slowly trickled now is eating a foot of water or a foot of soil away. And just in the last couple of weeks, it's changed again. And York County now is finding out what we already know, which I'm sure they knew, but they're finding out that there's the development and all that in certain areas siphon the water and it runs off so quick that it does destroy our streams and that's why. So that's where I think James City County has been a leader in that as far as stream restoration. We've got a lot of projects in the queue. We've got a lot we've done. That money has helped us do a lot of that and bring it along quicker. So I think that's very good there. The Hampton Roads Peninsula Health District, you know, we during the COVID pandemic and all that, there was not their fault. Don't want to put blame on anybody, but there was a lot of confusion. Everybody was trying to figure out what to do and all that. And if we would separate that into three districts, I think it would work better throughout the community and give us more reach and be able to, you know, okay, our area needs this, Newport News needs this, you know, and then I know when you're looking at things and going, okay, what can we put together and save money on? We'll put these groups together and this group together and this group together. And it looks very good. And I agree, you know, okay, we can save money here and here and put it to something else. But sometimes that savings isn't worth the issues that come with it. So that's something there that I think we need to look at, and I think would help us a long way if we ever run into. Hopefully, we're done with this pandemic. I don't know if we are. Nobody knows, but it would be nice to say, remember when, and move on in our life. The school's funding index, it maybe it's I don't understand it totally, but it seems a little skewed to me, and the you know it's almost like healthcare. The more you make, the more you can pay, and you know I understand trying to balance things, but you know life is not fair on anything, and as we all know. If it was fair, I'd have hair, but I don't. So, so you know, life is not
I got all
fair.
yours, Michael.
And so, you know, that would be something I'd love to see change and see, you know, because we put in, but by the time we do almost 50% of our budget to schools, and then about 25%, give or take, to fire, police, EMS, we have 25% left of our budget to run the rest of the county and to do everything we need to do. And it's really becoming very tight. I mean, we've been blessed to be a pretty wealthy community compared to some of the communities around us, which is great. But, you know, I think the state would, if they could help us and looking at this and going, okay, let's allocate different ways and in order to divvy up these funds that are coming. And I know there's, you know, plenty of money in the state. I always hear, and there never is. So I know that as well too. Of course, our officers, we're all definitely behind all our officers and what they do and all that. And we'd like definitely have the protection on our officers, and we have a great group here, and we definitely like to continue that. But these items that we have on here that are, you know, they're all to us should be number one. But we put them in order and ask y'all if you would pick up one or two or all six. If you're feeling really froggy, then we'd be happy to have you pick up all six for us and move ahead. But we're asking that please consider these and look at what you may be able to pick up and take for us and lead us forward. And if y'all have any questions for our board.
I did want to circle back just about, I know that one of the campaign issues was the grocery tax. And we did hear when we were at VACO last week that that's about a $550 million hit if that should go away, which will be on you all to find another source of revenue for that. Because for us, that is directly going to roads and education, and so that would be a huge impact. I understand. You know, we also, you know, Virginia is one of, I believe, 4 states that does not tax on services, just on goods. So there are those that would consider, you know, groceries should not be perhaps considered a luxury, whereas a haircut, sorry, Michael, would be. And so, you know, and I know that you're going to hear from the haircut industry that says, you know, don't tax us, but we just need you all to, you know, if we were to lose that amount of money, or a portion of that is our portion of that money that goes towards roads and schools, that's going to have a huge impact. So, as you're working your way in negotiating, I do want to put in, we're gonna have to find another avenue of revenue, and we certainly can't always come back to our citizens for that. And even if we were, we would probably not be able to make up what we would lose. So, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I wanted to do two things. One is to, first of all, just thank the legislators for the work that they have done for us in the past, and especially thank you for giving us some additional fiscal authority. The cigarette tax, which you gave us the ability to implement, has now gone into effect, and it is generating some significant revenue for us, and so appreciate that very much. I also want to thank Delegate Batten, who supported, or who introduced some legislation last year to try to have all of those votes that are being cast early as absentees or in-person early votes to the precinct in which the voter resides. What we are seeing, of course, is that some of the localities have actually implemented their own systems of doing that, and it just makes so much sense for the whole state to do it. So I hope that may be something that would continue. I got an opportunity to spend some time at a conference that Senator Mason put on recently about foster care, and as young people who are aging out of foster care and what happens after that. And it's a tremendous effort that we see going on there, as well as we work on the general issue of mental health care. And I know Delegate Mullen's been actively involved in the whole issue of criminal justice reform that's been so crucial as we've seen as a focus in recent years. And of course, Senator Norman's always been somebody who could help us to achieve some objectives. And as we're seeing from the revenue produced by the sales tax, I think that's something that we want to recognize as well. So we really do appreciate all of the efforts that you all have put forward. It does make me think about one thing related to that sales tax, and that is, I understand there is some talk about authorizing a 1% sales tax for school capital needs in many places. And so I hope that we figure out if there's any nuance that we need to be thinking about as it relates to our own sales tax addition that has its own kind of special direction. And then finally, just wanted to say I would love to hear what you all see as the outlines of this coming session, what we might expect to see coming forward that we ought to be aware of.
Yes, sir.
Well, I actually, first I want to thank you all for having us here, because it's so important that we have this dialogue. And I actually had a question based on something that Supervisor Larson brought up in regards to potential for the elimination of the grocery tax. I'm not aware what the cost would possibly be to James City County were that tax to be eliminated. And I'm sure that there is someone who knows what that amount might be.
We would be able to find that out and circle back to your office if that's okay.
I would appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Will do.
Thank you for being here, for having us here today, and for giving us the opportunity to hear from you what your legislative priorities are. Obviously, we're in a time of transition right now. The governor-elect has not yet put forward any sort of concrete legislative bills or initiatives at this time, so I can't speak to anything beyond what you already know that he said on the campaign trail there. The same goes with the House of Delegates. We're also in transition as well. I know Delegate Mullen and I, we're not exactly sure what our committee assignments will be yet. We do not yet have that information, and obviously that has a bearing on the types of prospects that some of this legislation may or may not have in the General Assembly. I have a quick question, and I don't know which of you or if any of you can answer this, but I know there's been conversation among a number of localities in Virginia about the costs of law enforcement having to take care of and monitor individuals who are having mental health crises because there are no beds available. And I'm just curious if James City County has seen an impact. I know smaller localities are unduly affected by that because they may only have a very small sheriff's department with a very small number of deputies. But I am just curious if there has been any sort of fiscal impact to James City because of that.
Looking to staff if
Yeah,
there are any.
I'm sure somebody in staff might want to address it, but we would also add to that the impact on the Virginia Peninsula Regional Jail, where a significant number of the folks confined there are experiencing significant mental health issues.
And we would definitely be able to circle back with that, because I'm sure that it's, and I might be mistaken, but I know that not only do our police officers, but I know sometimes, I believe the sheriff's department also has to help with doing some transport, et cetera. But we can get that number. And
Rebecca, do you have anything to add to that? No, just curious. Don't mean to put you on the spot. I didn't know if you had any info.
Well, I will say I know there is an impact. Certainly, the CTAC, the assessment center that's at Riverside, is immensely, tremendously helpful. So obviously, any funding, any additional support for that, I mean, that is just so helpful. So that's what I would just say from my perspective. As well as the Marcus Alert legislation that's coming down that you all are aware of. We do have a local planning group in consultation with our other localities that are under Colonial Behavioral Health. So certainly as we go through our plan for the Marcus Alert, as that deals directly with law enforcement and individuals who are having mental behavioral health issues, more will come out for that, as you all know. So that's what I was.
Step Virginia.
It is, but it was separately funded. So DCJS and DBDH Behavioral Health, they're supposed to be working together. So each locality is supposed to submit a plan by the end of June 2022. So we're working jointly on what we need to be able to fully implement that. So I think as we go through that plan, we'll be having some request, I think, to be able to do that. So.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think we could absolutely have a full work session on mental health and
Yes.
what's going on in our community. And you know what? We should, because the CTAC that Rebecca referenced right there, we are working right now to take that into a 24/7 operation. But it does alleviate the pressures in some respects on law enforcement that other communities are struggling. But when we shut down the state hospitals for admittance, that did not shut down forensic TDOs. So out of our jails and our courts, what it shut down were the people at the emergency rooms. And so it only put additional pressure on that. Our CTAC here performs very well there. And as I said, there's a proposal on the board right now to take that 24/7. And I've been working to try to drive that. So we're doing a lot of work in that front, particularly with the emergency department. So again, we should talk about that full time. As far as first, I'd like to thank all you for the amount of work you do on outside statewide boards and commissions, transportation, high growth communities, VACO, veterans, I mean, y'all being such a big part of the statewide thing really serves us in the community very well. And I think you've done, I know it, in all your spare time, you get to go to VACO and moderate a panel, right? So I appreciate the extra time and effort that you put forward in doing that. Supervisor Larson talked about something that we just heard very regularly at the Senate Finance Committee, and that's bills in the drawer. And so there are bills in the drawer that we've been talking about paying for a long time and have not. So there is surplus money out there. The revenue looks very good. But one thing that was presented was the re-benchmarking of schools. 2 years ago, when we did the re-benchmarking, the actual cost to operate over and above what we pay, that was $831 million. This year, that number's $244 million. Well, because of the lack of enrollment during COVID, the lesser student population. So one thing that we didn't talk about is how we're going to address that. Because there's no way you can go with the actual $244 million number, knowing full well you're not dealing with the full-blown population that will be under this 2-year budget biennium. So that's just one of many things to address. Your grocery tax, I liken that to the bee poll discussion. Let's go to Richmond and try to take away things that directly go to the local government's coffers. But that doesn't mean we don't have room for tax reform. Your haircut example, I still have a political flyer from my predecessor that said, can you believe he wants to tax, and then named haircuts, oil change, like 80 things that are currently not taxed. So it's not an easy conversation to have, but it's one that we need to have in Virginia to modernize our tax code and to have that discussion. And that is exactly the same point to the local funding formula. I mean, if you just look at my district, the funding formula, you're like, 7.4 or something in that range. It goes down to 0.29 with, that means you can pay 74 cents on the dollar, supposedly. And another locality within 5 miles of my, right on the Virginia Peninsula could only afford 30 cents. So that is quite an undertaking. And I don't see it done in a General Assembly session. What I see is that is a full-blown, we love our work sessions and our study groups in Virginia. But this is one that needs it, right? It needs economists, it needs educators, it needs people from rural areas, urban areas to come together and determine how do we do what we do and do we continue to do it that way. I think regarding the health departments, boy, there's going to be a lot of analysis on health departments, I would think, across the state, right? I mean, I said during the pandemic that VEC's computer problems and issues were extraordinary and well documented still this moment. But to consider VEC to be prepared and staffed for a pandemic is something you couldn't live day to day. Same with health departments. I don't know what their normal day in, day out year looks like outside of a pandemic, but we know when we dropped a pandemic on them, they just couldn't handle it, right? Weren't prepared. So I don't know if decentralizing, that's certainly an interesting discussion we should have, but I expect us to have real solid analysis on how we handled and what we did out of our health departments and what that structure on a go forward looks like. I'm glad to hear you mention the SLAF funding, and I should also put in a plug for the Soil and Water Conservation Board. Yep. I just met with them about 2 or 3 months ago, and I had no clue all the programs and all the things that they did. So the amount of money that you put in and that we should put in more to do those things is critical, because if you look at the watershed improvement plan of 2030, 2035, I think, to clean the bay to the level that it is called for, 68% of that, the nutrient runoff and the work has to be done in the agricultural community. So we've done a lot of the basic work and done a lot of the easier things, but now the heavy lifting begins, is how you deal with the runoff, how you deal with the York County situation that you referenced this morning based on building and growth. And so I am thrilled and very appreciative of y'all being as aggressive with the stormwater, with SLAF money and funding. We've put some money in that in the past. You being poised and ready to draw it down and use it is just of critical importance. And as you said, if you don't focus on it sitting here on the Virginia Peninsula, where else would you focus on it? So I appreciate the partnership that we have with y'all and with other areas. I'd love to get some of the numbers that Mike and Amanda ask about. And again, we're very bipartisan delegation, 2 and 2, and I continue to represent and feel like that when we come together to talk about matters of local interest, that we work very well, very closely together. And I think we'll continue to do that on go forward. So I appreciate you having us here today.
Thank you.
Were you able to get your question answered to the best of it? Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, that's all for today. I appreciate y'all coming out and thank you for all your hard work and congratulations on the re-elections. I know re-elections are fun to do.
Well, and congratulations on your recent honeymoon,
Yes.
Delegate
thank
Mullen.
you very much. I appreciate that.
That was probably even more fun to do than the re-election campaign.
I would recommend it a lot more.
Thank y'all very much.
Maybe we could get a quick picture so that,
Yeah.
So could we, is it okay if we stand back here?
Call us back.
Want to stand here and have them in front of us? Senator Mason, do you mind getting a quick picture?
Oh, absolutely.
I guess so, yes.
No, right here.
Mike?
Back down here.
I'm boosted.
Yes. Isn't that nice?
Not an iPhone.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank
Appreciate
y'all.
it. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, bro.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, bud. Thank you. Mike.
I think it's important to let people know that we had that discussion with them. That's why I wanted the picture, so thank you.
Oh, yeah, not a problem. Glad, good call.
Chairman Hippel, before we get off the subject of legislative agenda, I thought I would, nice little slick article of the legislative agenda from the PDC and TPO, and I only got one copy of it. I don't know whether, Brad, did you get a copy? Anyway, we'll pass it around so everybody can see.
Okay.
I thought you might be interested to know that of interest to us is complete the I-64 gap.
Yep.
So that's a high priority on their list. So I'll pass that down so you guys can take a look at it.
Thank you. All right, next for our information, the
That's it.
Williamsburg James
I'm
City
looking
County
at it.
Preschool Needs Assessment. Ms. Finru.
Hello.
Welcome, Rebecca.
Afternoon. So I'm going to give a very quick introduction, and then I will hand it over to our consultant representatives. They are here via Zoom, and they will be handling the presentation and any questions that come forward. And then myself, I'm here, and then I have another member of our preschool task force, Ms. Carla Javier, who is with our Early Head Start program as well. So Ms. Adam and Ms. Gillespie have presented this to the school board as well as the city council, same presentation. So now they're presenting to you all. And again, any questions you have, feel free to direct them to the consultants. And then if they can't answer, myself and Ms. Javier will do our best. So I will turn it over to the presentation, which should be coming up very soon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tara Adam. I'm a research analyst at ONLAR. I've also served as the project director of this needs assessment for the past few months. I'm also joined today by Kathy Gillespie, who has served as a subject matter expert, and she is also ONLAR's director of technical assistance team. All right. Can we all see the slides? Perfect. Okay, great. So jumping right into our approach for the needs assessment, there were two goals. The first of which was to identify the needs of all children and families within the localities, as well as explore potential preschool expansion options. There were several guiding questions to this needs assessment. The first of which was, what is the current early childhood landscape in the localities? How many children are early childhood providers currently serving? How has this number changed over time? What are the individual capacities of the providers? Are there children who are eligible but not currently being served, and why? And if barriers exist, how have similar early childhood systems resolved them? What is the cost to deliver early childhood programming to children? Is it better to have a preschool in public school elementary buildings or in separate buildings? And then finally, what is the best means or most efficient way to provide preschool services to an increased population? To answer these questions, we used several different types of data sources, both secondary, such as administrative data, subsidy data, fall membership data from VDOE and census data, as well as primary data that we collected through online surveys, focus groups, and an on-site visit. So in the interest of time, we're going to jump right into findings. And for our first research question, I'm going to go relatively high level. I invite you to read the report that I believe you all have a copy of that provides greater description and more detail on the providers. So what is the current early childhood landscape? Overall, we have approximately 25 public and private options available to families within the localities. While there are common elements across the providers, many have unique curricula, instructional or pedagogical approaches, and/or resources and materials. As such, families have a wide variety of options to choose from when selecting a provider and program that best suits their child's needs. As we know, providers don't exist in a vacuum. They are influenced by several different factors. At the local level, this could include governing bodies, demographic characteristics of the community population, as well as local economy. In addition, they are influenced by state initiatives. As we know, early childhood education has been a particular focus in the Commonwealth in the past couple of years. This is evidenced by the receipt of a $9.9 million competitive PDG B5 development grant in 2019, Governor Northam's executive leadership team on school readiness, a shift in the oversight of subsidy from VDSS to VDOE, and then the recalibration of VPI funding. So public providers, in this context, we are referring to those who are either locally and or federally funded. First of which is Advancing Community Excellence, or ACE. They provide several community and children's services throughout the localities. However, they also provide Head Start, which is known as Prep Academy. Head Start is a center-based program that operates out of 3 locations: Norge Elementary, Poplar Creek, and James River. There is eligibility criteria that prospective families must meet based on income and residency. There are 7 classrooms across the 3 locations, enrolling approximately 16 children per classroom, and they have the capacity to serve 147 children. Our next provider is Bright Beginnings Preschool. It is the public school-based preschool program offered by the WJCC School District. It currently operates out of 5 locations: DJ Montague, Laurel Lane, J. Blade Blayton, Norge Elementary, and Clara Bird Barker Elementary Schools. Again, there are several eligibility criteria that prospective families must meet. These include age restrictions, residency in the WJCC School District, the ability to meet VPI criteria. This is either income, experiencing homelessness, or parental or guardians do not complete secondary school, as well as they must complete a developmental screening. There are 32 classrooms across the 5 locations. Each classroom is on average about 838 square feet. There are about 15 children per classroom, with 8 in the self-contained classrooms, and they have the capacity to serve 403 children. Child Development Resources, otherwise known as CDR, offers, again, several community and children's services, one of which is Early Head Start. Early Head Start operates as both a center-based model as well as a home-based option. So the center-based operates out of 2 locations: Griffin Yeats Learning Center, as well as Lafayette High School, with a new building forthcoming. Again, there's eligibility criteria based on residency and family income. There are 6 classrooms across the 2 center-based locations, with the capacity to serve 146 children overall, with 48 of those being in the center-based programs. In terms of our private providers, there are over 20 options available to families. Again, going back to my earlier point, these range in a variety of different factors, such as ages served, services and resources offered, hours of operation, geographic location, quality rating, and tuition. The Virginia Child Care Subsidy Program is offered by, the Commonwealth, and the purpose is to increase availability and access to affordable quality child care services in the Commonwealth. So basically, early childhood providers are able to select whether or not they want to accept a subsidy voucher from an individual to offset the tuition costs for their child. And the monetary value of said vouchers is based on the child age, which is pretty typical for most states. There are currently 8 providers within the localities accepting subsidies, as you can see on the screen here. However, the number of spaces reserved for children with subsidy vouchers ranges based on the provider, as well as the market rates that those vouchers cover. So our second question was, how many children are the early childhood providers currently serving, and how has this changed over time? So on average, there are an estimated 4,128 children ages 5 or younger who reside in JCC on a given year, and about 55% are ages 3 to 5. The preschool population has basically doubled from 2014 to 2019, as you can see in this graph, which provides a comparative analysis with York County as well as Newport News. Specifically in 2014, there was about 2,363 children, or excuse me, in 2014, there was 1,335 children, which jumped up to 2,363 children in 2019. An estimated 995 children ages 3 or older are enrolled in a nursery or preschool program in any given year based on ACS census data. More than half of these children are served by public providers. In school year 2021, 529 children ages 3 to 5 were served by public providers or used subsidy vouchers for private programs, and 370 children were served under H3. Our third question is a long one. It's a three-parter. The first was, what are the individual capacities of the providers? Are there children who are eligible but not currently being served, and why? And if barriers exist, how have similar early childhood systems resolved them? So in terms of eligible children who are not currently being served, ONLAR used an estimation method used first by Rel Appalachia in 2009. And it uses the average reported enrollment totals for kindergarten through grade 2 as a proxy for the eligible preschool population. So as you can see in this table, we took the average enrollment across K through 2 for the 2017-18 through the 2020-2021 school years. We then combined these averages and doubled it to reflect ages 3 and 4 populations to arrive at 1,476 children who are estimated to be eligible for preschool services in the localities. We were able to ascertain selected demographic characteristics based on fall membership data. And so this table is just reflecting what those numbers might be. I'm calling out here specifically the economically disadvantaged as well as the students with disabilities based on the eligibility criteria that several of the providers in the community have. So our caveat here is that the 1,476 estimated children do not account for those children who are currently being served versus not. And as such, we removed the estimated 995 children from the census data that I called out earlier to arrive at 481 eligible children who are not being served based on age alone. Again, going back to my point about the eligibility criteria focusing on economically disadvantaged as well as students with disabilities, we wanted to further refine that estimated number for you all. And so we arrived at 231 eligible children who are not being served based on age, economic disadvantage, and student with disability status. So as we know, there are a variety of different reasons why families may not enroll their child even though they are eligible for services. This could be parental preference to stay at home. There could be inconvenient locations based on their home or their place of employment, or that they perceive that their child may not be developmentally prepared for preschool at this moment. However, if all 231 children wish to enroll, they would be unable to do so because providers are currently at or very close to capacity as shown in this table. As such, a critical barrier that must be addressed is the need for additional preschool space. Some creative solutions for the issue of space by peer early childhood systems in neighboring localities. The first was Newport News actually recently consolidated 2 of the district's smallest locations into existing preschools and elementary schools to result in 4 preschool locations. So basically adding additional classrooms and preschool spaces. And the second was that many communities across the Commonwealth have opted to explore and implement mixed delivery systems for preschool programming. I call it here that in 2017, Smart Beginning Southwest received a mixed delivery grant to expand preschool offerings in the localities. Similar, they were facing greater demand than what capacity allowed. And so they basically created a coalition between the public school system, community action agencies, local workforce investment boards, community partners, and health social services to develop and identify slots for children who are eligible for preschool services. Our fourth research question was, what is the cost to deliver early childhood programming to children? Cost for early childhood is broken down into both personnel and non-personnel costs. Personnel is sort of dictated by the size of the program, the ratios in group sizes, staffing decisions, salaries, and mandatory benefits. Non-personnel is often facilities and rent, materials, supplies, and resources. To provide you all a holistic view of programming in the localities, we utilized data from Child Care Aware of Virginia 2021, as shown in the table. So the preschool ages 2 to 3 is an estimated $192 weekly average cost, and the preschool for 4 to 5 is $177.50. So center-based full-time early childhood programming varies considerably by age, and so that discrepancy is likely due to that, as well as differences across the providers in terms of materials, facilities, and different access to resources. However, again, we wanted to provide you all a more detailed or nuanced estimated cost per child in localities. So we took the Williamsburg, James City County FY22 budget, as you can see in this table, and then utilized the capacity of Bright Beginning, so 403, to arrive at the estimated annual cost per child. For example, in FY21 was $11,274.87. We assumed there was roughly 41 weeks of instruction, and so we arrived at an estimated $275 weekly cost. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to walk us through question 5.
Thank you, Tara. So question 5 was to determine whether it was better to have preschool in public schools, in the elementary school buildings, or in separate buildings. So to answer this research question, we did quite a bit of qualitative analysis to find out what other areas, whether it was state areas, localities within states, were doing. And what we found is that there are pros and cons for each approach. Next slide, please, Tara. So when we look at preschools that are integrated within elementary schools, there are several pros that are associated with that in the research that we did. One of which is that there is this possibility for a more integrated curriculum between the preschool and the kindergarten K, or even first and second grade curriculum, so that there's more continuity for students as they go through the program. You can see here that improved access to resources is important, and as part of what we found, better transitions between preschool age programming and school age programming if those preschools are housed within the elementary schools is possible. And then there are some emerging research results that show that there are better academic and social outcomes that come from being in a longer term program within a school building, starting in preschool and going through grade 3, than if they're in a separate preschool and then go into the elementary schools. That is emerging, but we thought it was important to point it out so you could see that there's some evidence there. Next slide. On the flip side, the cons to this particular approach is that what we have seen in places where preschools are added to elementary schools is that when resources get tight, often the elementary school program is prioritized, and then there's a sort of an allocation issue with resources between the elementary school and the preschool. Most importantly, what we have noticed too is that because of the differentials in the ways that preschool or early childhood teachers tend to get paid, there is a differential in salary between what elementary school teachers might be making versus the preschool. Not as much an issue in the Williamsburg James City Council school system because the public preschool teachers are paid on the public school pay scale, we've come to learn. But it's still one of those things just to make sure that there's equity and parity across the board if you're going to put those two programs in the same building. Next slide. So separate preschools, you'll notice that as we culled through the literature and the research so far, that there are fewer pros to this, but what we are seeing is that, for example, that having a larger building with more capacity to serve more children in the preschool age does lend itself in some cases to providing a higher quality program to many children and families. And certainly, as we were talking to about how some of these programs have a certain eligibility percentage of children with children with disabilities who have to be served, there does increase some access to children with disabilities to these inclusive programming options when there are larger preschool programs in their separate buildings. On the other hand, what we learned is that when you have separate preschools, fewer sites may increase your transportation costs as you have work to get families who may not have easy access to transportation to fewer sites that may not be as close to their home as some more sites might be. Right now, what we're seeing in some localities too is that when there are wait lists in certain areas, like if they have one building in one area and that one's full and they have a wait list, but there's not a wait list at the other program, that there's still some lack of access problems that occur because there are different capacities at different buildings. And then one of the things that we do see is that early childhood is already, as a field, relatively isolated from the K-12 world. And when you put them in separate buildings, you are then also separating out the teachers and the administration from that K-12 environment and putting them even more so separately in the field of education for children. All right, so what is the best, most efficient way to provide preschool services to an increased population? And I think what we have found, and we're going to answer some of that in just a second, but what we have found is that this question is best answered by looking at the issue of high quality. Because when you're talking about efficiency, you're talking about making sure costs are managed, you're talking about providing the best possible services to the most number of children. And so when that comes down to what we don't want to insist upon is that there's a compromise of quality for the kinds of programming children get because of the cost. So what we did is provided you a little bit of information on the next slide about what that means. First of all, let me give a little intro into that first, that there is no one size fits all. There isn't a best way necessarily. It does come down to these decisions about high quality. And what we are seeing in most localities and in the states, and in fact, the Preschool Development Grant Birth to 5 program that you all have as the state is a mixed delivery system grant. That's a federal sort of leaning towards how to do this the best way. There are states that are looking at that from the state level and then helping localities figure out how to do mixed delivery. And basically what that means is that you're taking funding from from all the different early childhood programs and making sure that they are working together to coordinate, to collaborate, and to work as a team, essentially, as a one program, not as one program, but one as a collaborative to make sure children are in the slots that they can be in to receive the highest quality education. So you might see, for example, a blending of a Head Start program with a public preschool program. You might see public preschool slots in private childcares that are rated high quality, and how many variations there are of that particular, those different permutations was what we see out in the field. Each community is working out that balance of how they create slots and blend their work together in different ways. So throughout this, as I was mentioning, we do really want to make sure that what is maintained is the high quality programming across the board. And so we looked at many factors to say, what does that mean? It means you need to have highly qualified staff, and you need to make sure that they're compensated well. You need to make sure that programs are thinking about their curricula and their pedagogy and how they're teaching children and making sure that those activities are developmentally appropriate, and that you're looking at programs that value and engage families in ways that are meaningful in their child's education as a precursor to how we like to see them involved in their elementary school years. So next one. So that feeds us into our recommendations. And our first recommendation, if you'll go to the next slide, please, Tara, is that we believe that the best option at this point is to expand in order to add those 231 children that Tara mentioned earlier that are not currently being served but are eligible for public preschool. In order to do that, if you are interested in doing that, based on space alone, you'd need at least 10 classrooms, but based on the ratios and the ways that we, best practices in early childhood, you'd probably need closer to 25 new classrooms to accommodate those 231 children. When we look at those numbers that Tara gave us earlier about the per year cost, based on what Bright Beginnings is currently spending for their program, that's an additional $2.6 million in funding that would be needed in order to support those 231 children. And so in order to do that, you really are going to have to look at very creative solutions on how to work together as an early childhood system to make sure that the whole system can accommodate those 231 children. So we have a lot of questions that we had put out to the school board about what kinds of things they should consider. And it comes down to really like what can be done at any given point in time, how much money can be allocated to this, how many spots could be put into place right now, what might be a step-up plan to get to the full 231, what plans would we need to put in place to make sure we're continuing to estimate and anticipate additional spots as the population tends to grow. Looking at what the supply of educators is right now and making sure that those that are available for potential expansion could meet the requirements of the Bright Beginnings program in terms of education and years of experience. And then looking specifically at transportation, because as we are thinking about adding more children, making sure that they can get to the public preschool program is going to be important. So what our first recommendation really comes down to two different options. We definitely sort of fall more on the side of the mixed delivery system because it has the greatest potential to serve children without necessarily building a new building or creating, a separate space just for public preschool. And it is the most cost efficient because you are talking about braiding and blending funding across programs in a way that allows children to be served in high quality programs across your existing high quality programs that you have in your community. And there are several different kinds, but one that I mentioned earlier was this notion of subcontracting, where you create spots or slots or even an entire classroom within a high quality private program that then becomes part of the public preschool program. We've seen that work really well in North Carolina. We've seen it work in some other localities where they have high quality programs that they can then partner with and create that extra space. Only one option, but definitely one that seems to be gaining some leverage as we look at the different places around us. Next slide, please, Tara. We did recommend to the other entities this idea that if they are going to go that route, that they consider a coordinated enrollment system, which is simply a way for families to fill out one application for eligibility for all of the programs that participate in that public funding. So they only have to fill out paperwork once, but that application then determines which of the public programs they're eligible for and helps them find locations for those public programs that suit their needs. The other option is the potential allocation of classrooms within existing elementary schools within the district. There are many benefits to that. And I think if that's an option that you're considering, I think we've talked some with the school board of that there are plans potentially to add on to or potentially build a new building that would then have space for preschool. And if that was what we recommended to the school board was, if that's the case, consider having dedicated space for the preschool program in that new elementary school. So I think that's really one of the possibilities if that is an option. Again, this boils down to budget, what's feasible at any given time, and what could potentially be stepped up or added on to over time. Next one, please, Tara. Okay, the last option within option 2 is to allocate to, one of the things that we did talk about was consolidation of programs into fewer public preschool programs across the localities. And we said, don't do that. That could actually create more transportation issues than you will want. And certainly what we're trying to also make sure is that families have some options in terms of what works for them about where they live, where they work, just in terms of access and also just making sure that the program that they choose is right for their child for various reasons. So we don't recommend consolidation at this point in time. All right, Tara.
Yes, so just going to close this out. In addition to our concrete recommendations, we did offer several opportunities for systematic change within the localities. The first of which is to strengthen cross-provider communication and collaboration through equitable representation on decision-making bodies. The second is to increase transparent communication with the WJCC community at large. And then third is to reflect on DEI practices in early childhood program operation. So that is it for us. Thank you all, and I think we'll open it up for questions at this time.
I had one question on one of your slides where you were talking about different studies. It said Payne 2004, I believe you referred to. Does that mean that study was conducted in 2004? Mm-hmm. Is that where that information? Were there no more dated studies than that. That's almost 20 years ago now.
It is almost 20 years ago. I think you've hit on one of the issues within the research world, which is that early childhood very often doesn't get the attention it needs within the research. And Tara, I'm not sure which slide that's on and what the content was. You'll see that in other slides when we quote things, they are more recent, like 2018, 2021. But I think that, yeah, you're hitting on something. But do you see which one that is, Tara? Because I would wonder.
Yes, so it was in regard to the research base on integrated preschools.
Right.
So
Okay.
that is the last
Yeah.
time that they did something of that nature.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
I have a few questions if this is a good time to go ahead with
Yes, sir.
those.
Go right
Okay.
ahead.
So the first thing I was curious about was I didn't see anywhere in the report or in your presentation today information about the online surveys that you did of teachers and community members. And I wondered if you could give me a little bit of detail about that. How many surveys were submitted, and what did the instrument include in its questions?
Sure. So we fielded 2 online surveys, the first of which, as you mentioned, was more of a demographic background of teachers. For example, their experience in the classroom, how many years they had served, sort of their educational attainment, if you will. So that was sent to Bright Beginning staff, ACE staff, as well as CDR staff. And I believe we had about 161 responses. Some of that data is included in the report itself. Unfortunately, given the time constrictions, I wasn't able to really dive into that today. But I do invite you to read through the section in particular about the providers. You'll find some of that.
Yeah, could you send us the survey instrument itself?
Yes, I can.
Were there any
confirm with
questions
Kathy.
on it about facilities?
Not on that survey. There
Right.
was a additional survey that you might have mentioned, was the larger community stakeholder survey, and there were several different questions on there that we asked community members to respond to regarding their perceived quality of the facilities, things of that nature.
Right. I think I filled that survey out. I don't recall it asking questions about the difference between elementary school facilities and the consolidated facilities.
No, it did not ask those
It didn't
questions
ask for
in
the
specific.
no. Mm-mm.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious, because one of the things that struck me about your report and the presentation is that I thought the report was very, very interesting. It had a lot of good information. It provided a very balanced view. And then the recommendation comes down very strongly suggesting that there is, in fact, a preference for one versus the other, whereas in the earlier presentation, it was clear that the evidence supported a sense that there's no one-size-fits-all, and that in some instances, one system may be better. There seems to be an assumption in the report, if I may, that we currently have preschool in all of our elementary schools, which gets to what seems to be a very strong argument in favor of putting classrooms in preschool classrooms in elementary schools, which is that it would allow the students to spend a longer period of time in one facility. And we only have about half of our elementary schools that actually have preschool classrooms in them. So I was kind of surprised at the strength of the recommendation, especially since I don't think anybody has ever talked about just having one consolidated preschool facility, but rather having some preschool facilities so that the geographical reach of the county can be well served. But I was curious about some of that, and again, wondered if there was any additional information that we're not seeing that would be helpful for us to understand it a little bit better. I also wanted to just highlight something else that I saw you present and I think it is important for us to understand this because it is a crucial aspect of our preschool program. The Williamsburg-James City schools have done an outstanding job of providing preschool services for children with disabilities. students who fall into the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I think our school system is recognized as providing exceptional levels of service. It does mean, of course, that the individual class size is lower, and it's where we talk about preschool classes averaging about 15 students per classroom. Our number is actually, in the Bright Beginnings program, under 10 students per classroom. It's about just about 9 point something students. And I think, again, I think that's a real sign of the strength of the program for students with disabilities. The challenge has been that students with economic disadvantage may not be able to take the full opportunity of a preschool education at the current levels of enrollment, and we want to add more of those students, and other students with disabilities who may need to, who may currently not be served by the program. So I think it is important to kind of recognize that there may actually be a slightly higher average classroom size if we did adopt a program to expand public opportunities for preschool education, as more of those children would not necessarily come with requirements under the IDEA, so that you would get closer to that 15 number per classroom. I don't think it would get to 15, but it might get, a little over 10 or 11, and that would probably help. Is that an accurate kind of understanding?
To some extent, yes. I'm an early childhood special educator by training, and I will say that there is no research that says that there's an ideal class size for young children with disabilities. There is quite a bit of research to suggest that inclusive programming, that is programming that mixes children with disabilities with children without, including children with economic disadvantage, but not exclusively, right, is a very beneficial possibility for children with disabilities in terms of maximizing their developmental potential. And in that literature, the studies really center around a variety of different programs with different sizes, including private childcares that may have as many as 16 to 18 children in a 4-year-old classroom because that's legally allowed by the childcare licensing laws. And children, you can't really say universally that a small class size is what promotes growth and development. There are many things that promote growth and development, but it is possible in a larger class as well. So I would say with caution, yes, that's a reasonable assumption, but there are also many other ways of delivering mixed, services to children with disabilities in an inclusive programming that will enhance their development, whether or not they're in a larger classroom or not. So,
right, and let me make clear, I'm not arguing for a larger class enrollment. I'm just wondering what the impact would be, because my sense is that students who will come in under the IDEA categories would probably need a more intensive level of service in the classroom.
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no, because children under IDEA may come under, say, for example, speech only, get speech therapy a few times a week, which is a very low level of service, versus a child with a significant disability, to your point, which would take many more hours of service. I think the impact perhaps is on teacher availability and education and their understanding of teaching young children with disabilities. I think the impact could potentially be on classroom setup and materials, making sure that everything is accessible. And I do think that the impact could potentially also be on a program administrator understanding how to run a program that includes all different types of children and supporting that kind of approach and curriculum and pedagogy. I think that's where you'll see the impacts, and all of those things potentially have a financial impact as well. But you will need higher qualified staff. You will need people who have been trained to do both general education and special education. That might come in two different people, but in the same classroom, for example. So there are impacts in the way that the program is structured and the way it's staffed and the way it's provided for, in ways that also, and the smaller class size might be one of them, but it also could be a different teaching team organization of something of that nature, where the impact actually might be more significant.
One of the things, and I tended to agree with your earlier comment that while 10 additional classrooms dedicated to preschool would probably be a minimum. That was probably going to be more like 20, 25 or so that you would need if you were going to fully serve all of those students in a Bright Beginnings type of environment, right? One of the things that concerns me about the idea of putting those classrooms just in elementary schools is we do have some significant variation in our elementary schools in terms of economic circumstance. And I wonder if that wouldn't exacerbate that situation, that you would be creating a situation where you would have less integration of students based on their economic need if you focus on putting the preschool programs all into elementary schools.
And I think that's a very good point, and I think that makes me want to rewind just a tad and say that's not exactly, we're actually advocating for the mixed delivery approach, which could mean some of the classrooms or some of the slots are in elementary schools, but you may also want to consider your high quality private providers, partnership with your Head Start program and an early Head Start program to find those spots so that children, there are a variety. And I think there are some really good decisions that need to be made about where, if you are going to select elementary schools, where are the best ones to select, not just for the program itself, but for access to families and connections within the community, to support and provide those wraparound services if needed. So there are a lot of different considerations. But yes, I don't think we're advocating that they all go into elementary schools. We certainly are advocating that above and beyond consolidating the public preschool into a smaller number of programs than they currently have.
So a little curious as to why Newport News was identified as a creative solution to the preschool education problem, since what they've actually done is further consolidated into 4 centers. And
it's one approach.
That's more like what I would have imagined we would be looking at if we were going to provide some consolidated centers. And as I look at the benefit of the separate preschools, the pros include basically aspects of high quality, the greater efficiency in developing high quality programming and creating opportunities for specialists to be assigned to buildings that have a significant number of children.
I think that is a decision that you all need to make about what is going to best serve your children. We offered up the Newport News and the other organization as groups you could talk to find out the considerations that they took into mind as they were making their decisions, to see how well they mesh with what you're facing as a community, the solutions that you'd like to create as a community, essentially so that you could find, what we've learned I currently work for the PDG Birth to 5 Technical Assistance Center at the national level. And what I've learned in that role is that you rarely start from scratch. You very often talk with people who have gone through the same journeys or in the midst of those same journeys to find out what they're learning and to cherry pick or to, as we call it, copying and stealing everything that currently works and putting it into your system in a way that supports your system and maximizes what you have that's unique and specific to your system, rather than starting from scratch. So we offered up those 2 options for you.
That's a very good and nuanced answer, I think, which really speaks to the question of what we ought to be doing, and that's why I kind of am surprised at the very strong underlined position of no consolidation of services. Of facilities, because obviously one of the things we're going to struggle with is the question of, and I certainly hope we will decide that we need to bite the bullet and move in the direction of expanding pre-K education. There are going to be not unlimited dollars, and we have to prioritize how they are going to be most effectively spent and address the questions of, if we're going to create 25 new classrooms, that's almost the size of an elementary school. Right? And it costs an awful lot of money to build an elementary school because you're serving different kinds of needs. And it's not to say that you would be absent any costs in building facilities that are focused on pre-K, but they will be different kinds of facilities that will have different kinds of structures and needs. So I guess it's really just kind of, I was struck by that very definitive no, do not do this.
And I will say, okay, I will admit to a little bit of my personal bias coming into that answer, strictly from the standpoint of I believe that families should have easier access to where their childcare programs are. And in my opinion, when we look at the possibility of consolidation, you're talking about creating a pretty significant barrier for some families simply due to transportation.
Right.
And from that standpoint, and potentially raising your own transportation costs, when you think about it, there are other solutions that are much more tenable. Sure, you could consolidate if that ends up being, a financially sound decision and also then creates the program that you want. But I think what you'll find is that, there is still this problem to be solved with access. And I'm thinking about it from that standpoint as a parent who's looking for high quality care for my child. I'm not going to necessarily pick a program that I have to ride a bus to or drive 10 miles to when I can access something that's 2 miles away from my home and very close to my work. So
Right.
was bringing that lens into it. I apologize if it came across stronger than I intended it to, but it doesn't seem to be the best option for you, among other reasons, because WJCC has a strong early childhood system with strong partnerships that can be leveraged and can be done so in a very cost-effective way so that you wouldn't have to necessarily take that route of consolidating into bigger buildings, bigger spaces. You have options available to you, I think.
Yeah.
So.
I guess, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you entirely that you want to make sure that people have good access. Currently, we have elementary schools. We have one elementary school that has a fair number of those classrooms that is probably not within 5 miles of the bulk of the population served by that building, and it may well be that there's a different way to accomplish this. But I do thank you for all this information. I guess I would just say if we were consolidating, we would probably be consolidating in a number of sites as opposed to a single site. And probably some of them would be associated with elementary schools. It would make sense to do that. And I think we have been providing transportation for those preschool kids as they are distributed along those 5 elementary schools. Just wanted to make sure that I understood why there was such a strong recommendation and kind of put a marker on that, if you will.
I appreciate your
again,
question.
I appreciate very much the richness of the information that you've provided us. I think it's going to be very helpful for us. And I apologize to my colleagues for taking so much of your time.
That's all right. If you don't mind, I want to jump in.
Go ahead.
I agree with John on the marker there. I'll put my stamp on that as well. I'd envision the study would be the issues that we have right now with preschool in the elementary schools and looking to build an elementary school that the school board wants and looking to do what we want to do as far as build something for the preschool. And it could be at several different locations. The cost is going to be a lot lower and we're not going to have to staff it and all the stuff that comes in with a new elementary school. And I thought the recommendations would be from your group would be, okay, this is how you're operating now. And these are the things that can alleviate that. And maybe a standalone building that we can utilize the cafeteria, the library, and that sort of thing of the existing buildings, because our location of the schools are pretty good and our school system to me is fantastic. But I was, when you were going over your numbers, you had Bright Beginnings, you had Child Development Resources, Head Start, and all the other kids that may be out there that parents may not bring or want to bring or that sort of thing. And when I was totaling just the CDR, Head Start, and Bright Beginnings, it was like 577 as we went through the numbers. Taking out Child Development Resources, it gives about 449 of available children that are out there, not including what we may be serving. But my envision of this study would be, this is where you're at right now and what you're serving, not what can we serve and what's out there, because all the other facilities that are working privately within our community have the options for parents to go to those rather than go to this. So, I think what we're trying to do more of and correct me if I'm wrong, board, but I think what we're trying to do more of is figure out the problem that we have today that exists, because we're eating up with some of our school facilities where we can build 1, 2, or 3 different facilities a lot less than we can build a whole elementary school and save money, because we want to keep our quality education. We want these young children to be touched and learn and develop and go into our school system. So we don't want to miss anybody, and the earlier we get them, the better, of course. So we don't want to miss anybody as we're going along, but we don't want to end up having to do a full elementary school with principal, assistant principal, cafeteria help, janitors, teachers, and everything else. You know, the building the school is the least of the cost as operating it through the years. But if we have a standalone facility next to these other facility schools that we have, then we've already got a principal, assistant principal, guidance counselors, and all that can help within that system if it's needed. Most preschool students, I don't think, are going to the principal. But if we do an elementary school, we're going to have all that staff and all that cost and all that expense, where what we were dealing with here at the board was how can we help the school system and maybe put these buildings up next to the existing buildings that would house our preschool students. And I thought that was where I would see more of this, rather than, okay, you've got this and this, and this study says this, and study from 18 says this, and study, you know, the studies are great, and what other communities are doing are fine, and we pick different things for different communities, but we're unique in our community as well. And of course, no one has enough money to do everything, and with $11,247.87 per student at 2.6 million, not including school, that's a huge task to get beyond. We're spending, 50% on our school systems now. And so we've got to watch every dollar we spend, because by the time we do our school systems, fire, police, EMS, we have 25% of our budget left to operate the rest of the entire county. So it's not that we don't want to spend, because we're spending above and beyond what state allows us and grants us and gives us. And, but we want to keep a good school system, but we also got to monitor our funds as well. Yes, ma'am.
So I did have one question. Did you all speak to any of the pre-K teachers in those buildings that you noted where they had preschools? I'm curious as to how much interaction is currently going on between the pre-K teachers and the K-5 teachers, as far as, because that's something that you mentioned was the professional development and keeping the kids in the same location. Was there any opportunity to speak to the teachers to see how that's working currently?
So we did not have in-person conversations, if you will, through focus groups or interviews with the pre-K teachers.
Okay.
They were able to provide feedback on that community survey that I had mentioned earlier.
Okay.
And we did see quite a few number of teachers provide feedback on that survey itself.
Okay. Thank you.
Very briefly, I had a question for you. The $11,275, times 231 kids, 2.6 million, is just the personnel cost. I understand. Is that correct?
That is based on the FY21 WJCC school budget.
Okay, but does that include non-personnel? In other words, is that a pro rata share of the real estate that we're expensing over the years and all that?
Yeah, so that information was pulled from the budget itself, and okay. I'm thinking back to the actual page we pulled it on, and it had personnel costs as well as things like resources and materials and things of that nature.
Okay, all right. So, but the actual cost of the building itself was that's what I'm trying to drive at, is the real estate.
Got it.
You see what I'm saying? If
Yes. Yeah. So that number does not include any sort of construction costs or anything of that.
That wasn't
nature.
clear to
Yeah.
me, so I just wanted to, this is basically an operating.
Oh, okay.
Operating
you.
cost then. What we're looking at
Yes.
is an operating cost. Okay.
Yes.
In looking over the existing programs, we have 32 classrooms in our schools that are allocated to Bright Beginnings in five different places. We have Head Start, which I believe is in 2 of our schools. It gives numbers of students. I don't know how many classrooms. But the net result is, just off of the charts, I picked the numbers that you were talking there, about 368 students. So I figure that our current cost for what we're currently serving is about about a little over $4 million, which is probably already embedded into the school budget. So this would be an additional $2.6 million in personnel costs going forward, regardless of what kind of real estate we put them in. I think what's really interesting is that if you take our elementary schools are basically full to the brim. They're overcrowded. We know we need facilities, and we know we want to do something for pre-K. If you took those 32 classrooms and maybe even threw in about 4 more from James River and Norwich for the Head Start program, at 25 kids a classroom, that's about 900 kids that could be accommodated in normal elementary school in those classrooms that are being taken up by a significantly smaller number of kids in pre-K programs. And it appears to me that we're going to have to focus on the pre-K problem, because the pre-K is a constantly expanding program, whereas if you look at our 10-year elementary school, K through 5 population, that's relatively flat for 10 years. And so I think we have to really look at how we're going to go about funding for these 231 kids that we want to accommodate. A lot of it's going to depend upon what kind of money we get from the federal government, what kind of money we get from the state government, because it's going to be important as to what we do. I personally think that there are some compelling arguments you make about the benefits of being co-located with an elementary school. But I don't see that what we're looking at as being incompatible, because we've got the ability, I think, to either, I don't know whether you add a wing to a school or you add a separate facility co-located with a school, but it would be important for us to make sure that they're distributed so that there is equal access to them. Transportation is not that much of a problem. But the concern I have right now is that if we just build another elementary school without addressing how we're going to handle this whole pre-K problem going forward, I think we're missing the boat. So that's going to be, I think, the debate we're going to have internally. But I do appreciate the information. It gives us some figures and things to look at, just how we can go from here.
I think most of my questions
Thank
have been
you.
asked and answered so far, so thank you.
At all?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So I think we need to wrap it up or figure out a way forward, because it sounds as though some of us are at an impasse with the school system. Because when I watch their meetings, what I'm hearing is they need an elementary school regardless of preschool. Is that what you're hearing, Scott?
God, is your mic on? I'm sorry.
And
I could hear you.
That better? Yeah, that sounds
Yes,
better.
thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I've heard in the meetings we've had, is that from the school system perspective, they believe they need a new elementary school that would solve some of the pre-K or the spacing needs within the other elementary schools as well. But they've been pretty consistent in that over the last several years. And again, I do think, to your point, we've got to figure out what is the best path forward, and it will probably take a smaller working group to work through that and develop some solutions.
So and they're not interested in one building for pre-K, or maybe even two, to Mr. McGlennon's point. But, shoot, I had something right. It was right there. It's gone. So how can we, because it's coming on their CIP. And so we've got to get to a spot where we're going to figure out something. I'm disappointed. I mean, and it's not their fault, but I'm disappointed that there was no more recent studies than 2004. But I thought and then the piece about high quality, sort of subcontracting out at high quality centers. I don't even know how many centers, maybe Rebecca, would be considered high quality here. And do they even have any room? That piece we would need to know.
Yes, I brought Carla down because she's engaged in a lot of the discussions regarding mixed delivery, which is something that has been coming and talked about a lot. There are certainly, a few pros when it comes to building capacity and allowing that. There are also a lot of challenges when it comes to what is required of the private preschools who do participate in the mixed delivery. So getting those preschools to come on board might be a little challenging regards to that. But we have a capacity issue from birth to 5. So that certainly is something, the transition of it is something we need to talk about as well. So Carla, do you want to mention?
Thank you. The ANLAR's own data indicated that there are not enough spots in high-quality programs in the community for us to even purchase. I think if you look at their data, there might be 52 available slots in high-quality programs for the 200-plus children that they mentioned. And as Rebecca noted, to engage in a partnership with a private preschool program, that preschool program has to agree to follow all of the same requirements that the public school program has to follow. And so I actually spoke, they mentioned Smart Beginnings Southwest. I've actually met with those folks to get more information about what they're doing out there in terms of mixed delivery. What they're doing is very small scale. They've received funds through the PDBG5 grant. That money we don't even think is going to be available to us in the future because now the PDGB, Preschool Development Block Grant money, is going to go through VDOE and could go out for a whole lot of other uses. So we're not anticipating that there would be any further grant funding to help support a mixed delivery model. In addition to that, you really could not add on administering a mixed delivery program to your current preschool administration in the public schools. I worked for Bright Beginnings for 10 years as the assistant principal and as the assistant administrator, and their plate is full. So to ask them then to also take on administering programs in a La Petite or in another community-based program, you don't have the infrastructure in place to make that successful, because it would not be enough to just buy slots. One of the issues I had with ANLAR's report is that there's a great deal of difference between a child care and a preschool program. They sort of, in my view, mix those two things up. Child care, yes, one of the key things parents look for in child care is where it's located. They want location, they want hours, because they're basing it on their needs for employment. For a preschool program like Bright Beginnings or Head Start, those are not full-day year-round programs. They're not intended to be childcare. Most parents enrolled in those programs have to enroll their child in wraparound childcare. So what you can't compare apples and oranges. The kind of high-quality preschool programming that gets you the school readiness outcomes. I mean, I don't want us to lose sight of that. The whole point is, are these kids entering kindergarten ready to learn? So if we were looking for expanding childcare options in the community, that would be a different conversation than if you're really looking to expand your preschool program so you have high quality school readiness outcomes. So that's probably more than you wanted to hear.
So I guess that kind of takes me back to one piece of this that I wasn't sure that we had really talked about before we launched into the study, which was, is the school system interested in doing universal pre-K and preschool? Are they prepared for that? Or are they just looking to get, excuse me, kids that might not, that are already going to be behind if they don't get that extra, for a whole reason of circumstances? Are they just looking to serve that population, or are they looking to serve everyone? Because I think that's a big piece of the whole puzzle.
I don't think either Rebecca or I can answer for the public schools because
Sure.
neither one of us work for the public schools. But I know that from my experience with the Bright Beginnings program and conversations with Amy Gulick, who's the principal there, I mean, they really want to serve the kids they're already tasked to serve. You know, they're tasked to serve the children who have special needs, IDEA identified children with special needs, and they're tasked to serve children under the Virginia Preschool Initiative who might be experiencing risk factors. So they would like to just do that. Let's start with that. Universal pre-K is a whole other conversation.
Okay.
And they do have about 50 children on the waiting list right now for Bright Beginnings. So there are children out there who do meet the eligibility criteria, but don't have the capacity. So I do think, to Carla's point, the ones who meet the qualifications are the first ones that need to be served.
Yeah.
You know, there's certainly parents out there who can afford to send their child to some place. But the low income and the ones with special needs are the ones who need those extra attentions. And that's why we partnered with CDR, Head Start, and Bright Beginnings, because those are the students that need it a little bit more to be ready for kindergarten versus the ones who just need the childcare so their parents can go to work. So.
Yeah, I will just say that years ago, I was part of a program in a high-quality childcare center where students from the Nord Center came out and spent their day. It was an inclusion class, but we brought it. A teacher came from the Need Center, and it was a great program. But it lasted a year because it was a lot. It was a lot on the operator of the center. It was a lot on it was asking a lot of the teacher, the parents to be trusting. So there's a lot involved with just saying, okay, Kensington, we're going to bring you 3 kids. And so.
And I think the professional development and the specialized training that goes into the staff that serves those children does need to be taken into account because it is different than childcare. So I appreciate that distinction. And I do think, one of the things is that classrooms can be flexible. So I think that is something to consider as you're moving into, I don't want to speak to the CIP directly, but I do think, classrooms that are built for 3 to 5-year-olds can be transitioned if needed to kindergarten, first grade as well. So I don't think it's one or the other. So I do think taking into account transportation, shared services, all of those things is something that we were hoping this study would bring out. So that is just something to keep in mind.
Just a word about the qualifications of the teachers. The average qualifications of a teacher in a community-based program would be a high school degree, maybe some professional development. Your Bright Beginnings teachers in the public schools, that program has a higher percentage of teachers with master's degrees than any other program in WJCC schools. So, the level of expertise that you have they're not equivalent.
Right.
And I think that what we were looking at was the issue of overcrowding and alleviating that, not, okay, if we'll build another school, we'll build another school, we'll build another school, we'll just keep building forever. We were looking at what cost effect does it have on the community, because the community's going to pay for it, and what we can do as far as help this program with the school. Not say this is what you have to do, but how do we take these students that you have to have in there and take them out of the elementary school and put them into a building of their own so they can learn, because they're going to learn different than the elementary students, and they're going to have higher quality professional teachers in there with them. So, and how do we keep them on a campus environment? And it works for bus transportation, it works for cafeteria, it works for, even if they're not going to be there all day, it may be a snack time that the cafeteria can take care of, and that sort of thing. So I think what we were looking at was we want to support the school. we want to take the issue you have just by building a new elementary school is not going to solve that issue because that issue is going to keep growing. So how do we solve that issue? And if it's 1, 2, or 3 facilities on the school sites, then everything's coming to the same location. We've had for years, we'll build a school here and we'll build a school there and we'll build a school over there because that land's available and nothing connects to anything. And now all of a sudden I was in this school. Now I can't go to the school my buddies are going to because I live in this neighborhood and you live in this neighborhood. Now we're breaking up community again. And, you know, and I think we see that the school has an issue and has a problem, but 10 years we're flat. The next 10 years we're flat. We're going to build an elementary school for a flat 10 years, and I'm going to convince the general public out there that this is the best idea when I can go in and put a few buildings either connected or connected with a breezeway or something to the school system that I've already got support in and have the facilities in order to help that school and help what the school board is looking to do without building an elementary school that's going to cost me a lot more than these facilities that I can add on to the school system. So that's where it gets.
I think you did mention, I do think evolving flexibility, you know, size of classrooms that can be used for one or the other, because we all know James City County is continuing to evolve. And if you think about there's 50 kids on the Bright Beginnings wait list and there's 15 kids per classroom, that right there is 3 to 4 classrooms that you would need in order to serve just those kids that are on the wait list with more to come. So I do think at some point capacity has to be increased. It's what kind of capacity.
Right.
But if you want to talk about getting more bang for your buck, it's flexible capacity.
Yes.
You know,
And
so classrooms that could be
yeah,
moved
and
around and shifted around.
that's
as
right.
The age
Maybe
but
this
you're talking
one,
about building something.
last year this classroom was this size, and next year the classroom's this size, and that classroom's bigger, and be able to have the flexibility, and we can design that and build them. I mean, we have people that can do that and design that to have that flexibility. And if all of a sudden we don't need Bright Beginnings or pre-K or preschool over in this area, we put them in this area with this other classroom, then we can utilize that as classrooms for the school to have and use. You know, we just move that, but we're not stuck on this is the school. Now we've got a round circle, and we're going to put the community as a square peg into that round circle, and we'll drive it down there till it gets there. And it's just, to me, it's not the way to develop a plan of how to help out with these needs.
Now, I've worked in early childhood for over 35 years, and one thing you have to consider is that an early childhood classroom is not exactly the same as a third grade classroom. An early childhood classroom, you have to have a bathroom with a small potty. I mean, this is a reality, okay?
Yep.
And if you put a group of 3-year-olds into a class that was designed for a kindergarten classroom without a bathroom, without a hand washing sink, without the capability to have for their unique dietary needs, I mean, there are a lot of issues. Yep. There's also playground equipment that has to be appropriately sized and safe for kids who are younger. So it isn't exactly blocks that you can just move around.
No.
Unless you design that way. Now, Brighton Elementary School was designed with a whole wing that was designed for preschool. Norwich Elementary had a wing added on that is for preschool. And those two are very successful locations. But just keep in mind that there are some
and I agree.
details that you have to consider.
Yeah, I wouldn't
like bathrooms.
Say build boxes. I would say build the facility we're looking at for the pre-K. Now, if they decide they're not using it, then possibly second or third grade could use that. They'd have a little bathroom and all that. You know, you could shut it off and they could use a regular bathroom or use that bathroom or change the toilet, but design it for what we're looking at to enhance the school's ability to do what they're trying to do. Correct.
Bottom line, we can't force them to, right?
Certainly not.
I mean, we can
force
give
to
them, we can
expand
say,
their-
we're not going to give you $120 million, but we can't tell them they have to build a pre-K building.
Right.
I mean, I think that's why we've got to we got to try to work through the impasse that we are currently facing.
Right, but
Because
we
can say it, we can sit up here and pontificate all we want on what we want to do, but it's not it comes down to it. It's out of our,
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
we
it's not the money piece. I'm not speaking of that, but we could say, here's $25 million. They don't have to, they could give it back rather
Yeah.
than.
they could give it back. We could say this is what
So-
we would like to see, but I agree,
But
we
I mean, I
have to
don't
work
even know
with
what,
them.
right, and are we there yet? Like,
No.
where are we? So we've got to have that discussion too as a board to figure out where.
I would offer that what we ought to do as individual board members is sit down with some of our counterparts on the school board, have coffee one-on-one, and have this discussion. Because I haven't seen a lot of that. And it's one, they talk about it in their environment, we talk about it in our environment, and we've done some work at the liaison meetings, but I think between now and budget time next spring is going to be crucial, as Ruth says. We've got to try to come to an understanding, because I'm not comfortable just, saying, I know that they're crowded. They're crowded because we have intentionally put all of the pre-K programs into the elementary schools. Fine. Some of them are designed with wings. Maybe that's fine. That's great. You leave it that way. But we can accommodate a capacity issue that is mostly focused on the pre-K program, I think, much more cost effectively. And we just have to make that argument to them that we're willing to spend money to solve the capacity issue. Yep. But I'm just not willing to basically say, because you're talking about huge overhead costs and significantly greater construction costs. Yep. And that makes a big deal to us in the long run.
I mean, ironically enough, we went to a VACO breakout in Chesterfield County, where they have a 400 children that they're serving in one center. I think what would help with, I mean, I'm just kind of preaching to the choir now, but I don't need, there seems to be, and maybe it's on all sides, but it's like this unwillingness to, like, maybe we should go to Chesterfield, see if that, does that work? What about it works? What about it doesn't work? So that we have that information to chew on a little bit. And so okay, they did that and they're having these issues. But there doesn't seem to be, they don't want to look at that. And so that makes it tough too, I think, for us, because, I know when Scott was sitting, I was like, what? I thought that was interesting. It was they retrofitted an old elementary school. The county gave it back, and because they had a real need with their preschool population, and that's what they decided to do with it. But
to your point, what do the experts in the field, your early childhood principal, Amy Gulick, what does she want? What does she think would best meet their needs? I mean, they're living this every day. And as you saw, ANLAR didn't ask them what they thought would be the best possible solution. And thinking about the whole picture, the school division,
right.
But also that program, what would be the best option? And I know for a fact that Amy has some great ideas. So, there are some people on the ground who could help you.
Yeah, I think part of what we need to, this really requires a very much broader consideration. I mean, one of the aspects of this that we know we talked about was that there is an early childhood education need. There are child care needs. Is it something you want to think about in terms of consolidated buildings that you could provide some child care after the half-day program that would allow parents to know that their children are in safe, good environments that are helpful to them being able to go back to work and so forth. So I think there are a lot of issues that we could really talk about, but we really do need to talk about them seriously.
Yeah, I'm curious, is
sense of
this
what's
gonna
going
be on our, because we get our capital improvement plan, we meet, joint meeting, but we don't ever seem to get to the meat of something. We don't hash it out. So, and like I shared with you that it would have been my desire to have this presented together, all three, the two funding bodies and the school board, and kind of work through it, but there wasn't, the school board didn't want to do that. I mean, at some point, we're going to have to get in the same room and, if, I guess, if the attitude is you can either give us the money or not give us the money, which that they have the right to do that. I'm not criticizing that. That's just a fact. If that's what their attitude is, then we're just up here just spewing hot air and there's no sense in going further. So I guess you would need to find that answer out. Or is there a willingness to discuss?
I'll be happy to reach out to do that. You also, your joint meeting's coming up to talk about CIP, but I think you've got enough on the CIP that maybe that lends itself to the next discussion about that particular item that likely will be there.
I know, and I won't beat this horse down anymore, but
Or horse.
John has brought this up at least 4 joint meetings. And hey, so we knew about this 4 years ago. And John was saying, how about we do this? And John kind of headed how about we build the buildings that you need on, I thought it was a great idea. I said, well, that solves that issue. So it's not that this board doesn't want to solve the issue and doesn't want to put money into it. We want to solve an issue, but we also want to make sure we spend our money, that is the citizens' money, is the best way we can. And so as far as, I'm willing to work with the board all day long on the school board with our board and have meetings and all that. But this is not something that John hadn't carried, I know, for 4 years on this one item. And, 4 years ago, we could have started this and we'd probably have the facilities built by now. But, and then we'd be talking about something else today. So,
Like trash.
yeah, that's right.
Now we're
Next
moving
item.
trash.
Thank you, ladies.
And let us know if there's any other data that you need regarding this, like transportation,
Well,
how long people are transporting, any of those things.
I would like to know, prior to going, what is the relationship between pre-K teachers in the buildings with the K-3? Because anecdotally, I'm being told there is not a relationship, that it's very much separate. So I just want to know, that's, again, if the desire is, we still want everybody together, but I just want to deal with the data, the facts.
Well, as a matter of fact, Amy Gulick, when you asked that question of Ann-Laure, Amy Gulick, the principal at Bright Beginnings, texted me, and her short answer was, there really is very little relationship between Bright Beginnings teachers and staff and the elementary staff. Part of that is because the K-12 world
Sure.
is very different from the pre-K world.
So it's just the nature of the
It's
beast.
just the nature of
Yeah.
it. I mean, they go to each other's potlucks. They do, there are things like that they do. They play well in the sandbox, but they are administered by separate principals, which is a good thing. Don't ever change that. And they are, yeah, good. No one should ever change that. I'm going on the record. But they function very differently. Now, the transition to kindergarten, there are key points where they come together.
Sure.
So when children are moving up to kindergarten, there's a lot of data that goes up with those Bright Beginnings kids. But as far as just day-to-day interactions, the preschool functions as a school within a school.
Okay. All right. That's how, and that's not a criticism. It helps to
Just
know.
a reality.
Okay. Thank you.
One other set of information that would be helpful would be current understanding of what the transportation system for pre-K looks like in terms of, how much it's costing, what's dedicated to it, and, how does it work out?
I think that's, okay.
Thank you, ladies.
Mr. Chair, before our next study presentation, might we take a short break?
Okay. Recess. We'll come back out of recess, and next on our list, number 3, waste collection and consolidation. Grace Boone, want to talk about trash, huh?
Talk trash. Talking trash for a peg today, so.
That's right.
So
She'd be
good
proud.
afternoon. Myself and a few of the team members are here today, along with Mr. Chris Lund and Jennifer Porter with GBB Consultants, to present the findings of the waste collection and consolidation study. The board's interest for this study were to see if a consolidated program could provide more efficient services, better costs, and environmental improvements for the community and to the citizens. So may I introduce Chris Lund and Jennifer Porter.
Thank you, Grace.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board and Administrator Stevens. My name is Chris Lund. I'm here today with my colleague, Jennifer Porter, under the direction and guidance of Grace, Director of General Services, and her staff, to present an update to the board regarding the waste collection and consolidation study. It's been 4 short months since we began this work, and that I was last in front of you laying out the broad strokes of what we had been tasked to do. We have worked closely with your excellent staff, and essentially we've been staff extension to carry out this work. The agenda we have for you for this update discusses the key questions the county wanted to get through in the performance of our services. These include the phone survey, which we will present an overview for discussion, our key findings on the, based on our analysis of the existing counting systems, the current collection and hauling environment, and the benchmarking of other similar communities. Based in part on these key findings, the next steps for the county could be a decision on consolidation. And if so, some possible next steps that could be taken to move forward on that course. And then we'll have time for Q&A as the board sees fit. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jennifer Porter for the next group of discussion points. And I am just... There it is.
Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you
Afternoon.
so much for having us. I'm Jennifer Porter, as Chris said, and so glad to be here. He was here with you in July and really set the stage for the work we undertook. We've been very busy and focusing on these 6 key questions, which are here. Number 1, what program options should the county consider? Just briefly, as you know, your own program for trash is currently a free market program where people get their own hauler or use the convenience center, and there's an opt-in on the recycling program. So what other programs should be considered? Second key question is, should this be mandatory or voluntary? Should this be fee-based, number 3, or included in the tax rate, countywide or in the primary service area only? Should it be run by the county or contracted? And should you continue to maintain the convenience centers? So the focus of our effort was to give you the information to be able to answer the questions and start down a path. We're not advocating for a certain option, and the work is really trying to give you the metrics to really understand both as Chris noted, what the public thinks, what some of the benchmark communities are doing, and really what the cost analysis showed. Okay, why can't I get here? There we go. You know what? Is it me? Okay, here we go. It's tricky. Okay, so the first piece of the work was that we had a sub-consultant on our project called Shepard Research, which is a nationally recognized polling and survey research firm. And they conducted a statistically significant survey of James City County population, phone survey. Now, this was both cell phone and landline, and essentially
there was a nearly 7,000 residents were eligible in the calling list for this survey. They made more than 18,000 calls to get to the 405 survey respondents. With that number, and given the random nature of the calling, we were able to get to a 4.86% margin of error on the results. So what you're going to see here are the results of the phone survey, which we think there's a high level of confidence in. Simultaneous to this phone survey, the staff had a page up on the county website where the public could input comments, and nearly 100 comments were received through that portal. I'm going to focus these next slides on the phone survey piece, but I wanted to note we can also discuss some of what came forth from the public comments. So in terms of the phone survey, we asked people both what they thought about the current programs and what they thought about future programs. This slide shows, in terms of a future program, with the pie chart of the response, this was asked to everybody in the phone survey. Between the green slices there, you can see 56% of the people surveyed said they would be interested in a future change in the curbside trash program if it were equal or better than their current program. So we think this is pretty significant. You're going to see there is a high level of satisfaction in the current program, but we also note people are open to change. Now on the bar chart, in terms of what were the comments that the respondents noted and for what features they were looking for, I think this is really interesting. You can see at the bottom, the biggest piece was that they didn't want a late or a missed pickup. Secondly, or first cost, second, no late or missed pickup. But interestingly, to the point of consolidated collection, some of these things that are noted, for example, consistent scheduling, meaning everybody on my street's picked up together and all of the items are picked up in the same day, is not possible to do without a change in the system. Also, we note fewer trucks on the road. Now, people could choose, that's why you see the percents adding up. You could pick any items that you felt were important as a survey respondent. So fewer trucks on the road is another point that you can't achieve without a change. So I would just note those. Now, some of them are not dependent on a consolidated program, but some are. Like I said, we asked people also what they thought of the current system, and you can see here this was ranked on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being not important and 5 very important. How do you feel as the survey respondent about these elements of the current program? Trash at the bottom, just over 4.7 on average. Recycling 3.9 and bulky 2.5. Those three we would say, most direct impact to the resident with those services, and it kind of goes on down the line to the other items: storm debris, the bagged loose, vegetative, and construction. But, again, very high amount of appreciation of the current program, but I think that's also balanced with some specific needs that we saw that could be achieved in consolidation. We had 2 segments in the survey. One was for those who said that they received they had currently private hauler collection and or it was done through their HOA. And that's what you're seeing here. This was the predominance of the respondents. It was 95% of the respondents were in this group. And very high satisfaction. So you've got nearly 90%, 87% saying it's excellent or good. Happy, very happy, more than 90% with the frequency and even cost. 57% saying cost is appropriate. Bulky, nearly 2/3 saying go to the convenience center. Now on cost, and I want to make sure we pause here for a moment because it's going to relate to the findings we're going to come to next in the cost analysis. In terms of we asked how much are you currently paying for the trash service that you do have? We had 41% say I don't know, but of those slices where they said they reported a number, the burgundy 1/3 being between 26 and 30, and the 27% saying between $21 and $25 a month. Now, we did further analysis on this number and ended up getting to a range of between $23 and $25 a month. Okay, that's what we based on the mean and the mode and the sort of average and the respondents, between $23 and $25 a month for the trash piece. So you're going to see that number as we go ahead. So just to note, that is the current level of pricing. Now, of the 5% of people who, in the survey, respondents, who said that they did not have a private hauler subscription and they primarily or exclusively use the convenience center, very high, again, satisfaction with the convenience center. So this is a smaller slice of the survey, but you had 90% saying excellent or good. Half of the people saying they couldn't think of a single thing to improve. Very convenient, and this is a round trip number. 80% saying it took less than an hour round trip, and very high level of long-term use, more than 10 plus years. So again, why, the pie chart on this one is why have you not hired a private curbside collection? Almost half saying too expensive. There is a piece of just, it's a preference. People get in the groove of taking the materials to the convenience center and want to continue, and then a small slice on other reasons.
What percentage of the total is this group?
This is only 5%.
5%. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought you said
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
I wasn't sure. Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
this is only 5%. Okay, so as we then moved into we had both a routing analysis and a cost analysis that followed. I just wanted to lay out some of the key assumptions. So first of all, in the program that you're currently offering, and any community is currently offering, the trash is the most expensive cost in it. And it honestly, a kind of rule of thumb in the industry is that the 2/3 of the cost of a trash collection program is in the collection. Only 1/3 is in the disposal and the processing side. So this is a key framework in thinking about how we were undertaking our analysis. Of note, in the current county program, there's not a lot of information on, as we were showing in the phone survey, we were trying to elicit how much is currently being spent. We couldn't access the private hauler, routing information. We did find out some interesting information that played into the routing work, which was that there are, more than half a dozen companies operating in the county providing that private trash service, but 3 companies served more than 3/4, more than 75% of the customers. That's GFL, Republic, and County Ways. Thank you. So, and that is what.
What 3? Because I thought
Yeah, GFL is now county.
I'm sorry,
waste,
it's
isn't it?
GFL. I just had it. Yes. So it's Republic,
Waste management?
GFL, and Waste Management. Thank you. Oh my
And
goodness.
how much of a percentage?
76%. Those 3
So the
companies.
little person that we often hear about, we can't, we're often told we can't do this because of the impact on
Smaller
the
house.
individual, the small company. They're not really getting much of a piece of the pie as it is now. Okay.
True.
I think the reason they're not is because they're not sized like the other companies.
They also don't have the same equipment.
Right. So they can't haul and do the,
Right.
but, those companies have been around a long time in the county.
Okay, so we essentially looked at both a baseline. What we did in the analysis was look at a baseline scenario in the current status and then 2 collection options. In those options, we looked at both full county coverage and also just the PSA. So that's what you're going to see in the resulting numbers. And I would note this is we consider a planning level analysis. So this is not a full cost accounting analysis. We used the best data we had in terms of how the department's currently operating and what we could interpret from the survey data. I lost my thing. I don't know what happened here. Here we go. This one's, I can't get it. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the second subcontractor that we worked with on this project was C2 Logics, which does routing analysis, and we looked at both the the status quo, which I again said is the free market, and also a one hauler, one district option. So at the top here, you see the results for trash, and the bottom is the recycling, which is a consolidated program now. You have that through the Virginia Peninsula Public Service Authority, with TFC providing that service as an opt-in. Okay, so at the top, in terms of the results for trash and free market, I want to draw your attention to the 47 routes. So currently, the trash provision is, as we just discussed, you can call who you would like to serve, but we had those 3 companies operating at more than 75%. So what we did was sort of do a best case baseline here, where we said, if those 3 companies were actually serving the entire population, which I would note here, the universe of population that we used was the currently eligible recycling households in the city, which was in the county, which is nearly 29,000 households. So that's that number to note. Now, the result for the status quo trash is that we estimate that those households are currently being served by 47 routes. Okay, and you can see the hours and then the miles, nearly 6,000 miles driven. These are on a weekly basis to serve those customers. So again, this is a best case baseline, we're saying, because again, within this, we're assuming that the county is actually served by 3 companies, which we know is not the case, and that there are more companies operating. So to note that is important. But when we then looked at the one hauler, one district option, we got to 32 routes. So significant reduction down, serving those same number of customers with those same tons, with now just over 2,000 miles a week of road miles and associated maintenance costs there. So very important numbers to keep in mind. On the recycling side, because you essentially have a consolidated system, you have about 40% of households that are eligible are currently opting in. That's that 12,000 number. And so not a significant difference there in terms of the route optimization, but a significant efficiency gain on the trash side.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Can I grab on the routes?
Yes.
If we've got the 3 hauling and they're doing 47 routes and one does 32, how does that happen?
It would be one company operating with more trucks.
Yeah, why is it a different, because those
Because right
routes-
now because to get the customers for those 3 companies in the current system, they're basically this was interesting. When we looked at where they were serving, it wasn't that Waste Management was serving here and Republic was serving here. They're serving the entire county. So to get those same tons and serve those same customers, they're having to traverse the 3 times the number of miles that they would if it was one hauler. Because what you could do if you were going to serve the entire county is you would route it for maximum efficiency. Whereas right now you have a lot of trucks moving around inefficiently driving. You could have multiple trucks on the same street serving for the same tons and the same households.
Okay, almost like FedEx.
Michael,
like
that's like in my neighborhood, we have at least 3 different carriers that come on 3 different days.
Yeah.
And if it were all done by one company, we would all be on the same route on the same day.
Uh-huh.
So it would cut the traffic in my community by probably 1/3.
2/3, yeah.
What is a
So in this case, we did look at we looked at 2 haulers in 2 districts also, which essentially would take the county and divide it into 2. What we're showing here is it's one district is the entire county. That's the eligible population here. We have
when you're using the term district, you're talking about the entire county?
Yes, entire county. And these are going to play forth in the resulting cost tables too. So this is important to. Any other questions on this? Because then Chris is going to explain. Yeah, sure.
Just got some good advice to put it on the paper.
Where'd you get it? I did put it on the paper, but I'm not sure why. I don't know why I can't get that. Okay. Here, try. Maybe it's me.
The elusive mouse.
It's a tricky mouse. I don't know why nobody can't get it.
over.
Chris,
We could
just
change it well.
point at me when you want me to change it.
You can change it
Wanna do
up
that?
for you.
Okay, all right, let's do
Go
that.
ahead 2 slides then, because.
Okay, yeah, could you go 2 slides forward? One. Do you
I
want
was
to?
just, yeah, I was just gonna make one note on this, that this gives a depiction, obviously, you know, the pink's the county boundary, we looked at the PSA, and you can see this is where we derived the nearly 29,000 households for the full county, and it was about 5,000 less for those just inside the PSA. And what you're gonna see in the resulting numbers is, it doesn't really make much difference in terms of the cost, because it's very small, small difference, so you're gonna see that coming up.
Next slide, please. So, taking the key findings on trash collection, for the number of households, the estimated routes, the hours, the miles traveled, we could then make some estimates of equipment, manpower needs for operating, disposal, asset, and incremental management costs, and expenses for both PSA and the full county cases for private sector and for county operating alternatives. This table shows the estimated costs in the first column, the blue column, for the private sector hauler contracted out to the county, and in the second column, the green column, the county to operate the program. You can see, you know, we're looking here at the trash operating costs, because that was one that we didn't have. We know what your bulk services costs are, we know what your convenience center services are, but we don't have that hauler, that trash hauler. We know what your recycling costs are. You've got a contractor for that, but we didn't know this one. So the differences between the private hauler and the county, the difference is the profit margin, 20%. That's our understanding based on our experience and business practices. We've estimated asset and incremental costs based on industry and current numbers as well. You'll notice we've got a higher asset cost there for the county. If the county to operate it, because they've got to bring on more equipment than a hauler that is already in district, already in the county. They're in this area, they've got their facilities, they just need to add on some more staffs and some more equipment to make it happen. Capital costs are annualized and depreciated. I have a slide that presents the total upfront capital costs for the county or private hauler would need, and I'll get to that.
So I understand this slide a little bit better.
Yes.
The one provider private sector means that basically the county would contract with one provider to cover the whole county.
Yes,
The one provider county operates means we would do that in-house.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. I understand it better.
That was that one. Next slide, please. Oh, go back one. Here we go. The total annual cost of curbside trash collection and disposal from the previous slide is then shown here in the first line as the cost per household per month for both service area cases. So both the blue and the green column. Up at the top, you've got that trash cost. That's curbside collection for trash, okay? Now we've added in recycling costs. We know that. We know what the county charges, $7 a month. We also have a cost that the county has based on the information, finances that we've been given for bulk leaf and other services, and we have extrapolated that number up to serve the whole county in sort of a picking up bulk services 4 times a year. So curbside collection 4 times a year, do away with the call in, call up, and the individual costs per request. So that's what that $4 number is across the board. And then together, you've got all program services per household per month, both inside the primary service area and in the full county for a private sector contracted by the county, and if the county operated the system. It's a little more for the county to operate in this comparison. The status quo, what we've done is that black line at the bottom, the status quo, the private hauler for trash and the $7 recycling.
comes to about $30 to $32 a month, which is the number that Jennifer brought up earlier, talking about 23 and 25, okay? Let me see what I've got here.
Can I just ask a question about that? If I,
Yes, sir.
I may? So on the estimate of the $7 recycling cost, we know that the company that's currently under contract with the VIPSA tried to come back and renegotiate the fee. Has the market for recycling calmed down? And
It has recovered.
it has recovered.
It has recovered. They are making money on recyclables right now.
Okay, great.
In fact, I think VEPSA went back to that company and asked for renegotiation, and they said no.
Imagine that.
They're making some money now.
Okay.
Did you actually, with using the private sector, did you actually contact one of the current companies that are out there to base your rates on what somebody would actually be charging if they were to bid on it, I guess you would say? I mean, how did you come up with
We didn't
these
go
numbers?
so far as that. No, we wanted to know what the current costs were, what they're currently providing right now. I mean, if it's a free market, those are the numbers that they're willing to do the work for. Probably be, potentially lower, but if they're all competing against each other, there ought to be some good. That ought to be a pretty good number.
But I'm talking, if you have one provider that we contract out.
Yeah, we didn't want to go that far and have that discussion with anybody. I think that's kind of jumping the gun for us to.
Yeah, I
even-
was just curious how you came up with those numbers.
This number is based on the previous slide where we estimated all the disposal, the collection, the assets, for both all the scenarios, and then derived here the per household number. But I would say we did look at some recent bids from York County in terms of the trash collection. So just the trash collection was in the $7 range. That did not include disposal. So that verified, we felt like, okay, that is comparable in our 13.
Yeah, we did have some of those.
Thanks.
Next slide, please. So now we've looked at what the public input is. We've modeled and estimated the routes for the trucks, hours, miles traveled in the status quo system, and a consolidated service, and the nuts and bolts for estimated costs to the household who would receive this service. With this, planning level understanding before you, we hope discussion could then be facilitated and be productive based on this information. The questions then gravitate to why consolidation and why not consolidation. We've laid out some salient points here in this slide for the board to contemplate. So, the points are why consolidation? Well, residents now are paying $30+ a month for subscription trash opt-in recycling. Residents could be paying paying less for all of the services that the county offers, potentially based on our analysis. There's less trucks on the road, up to 64% less truck miles impacting greenhouse gas emissions. Residents want all items set out the same day. They want some uniformity to be picked up on the same day in their community. There's less traffic, increased safety where families live. A one-hauler system or a consolidated system provides those economies of scale and pricing. Provides an essential public health service. If you believe, sanitation, at least in the old days, is a public health issue and something to address. Less than 1 in 5 of the municipalities that we benchmarked use a subscription model for residential services. Systems or communities similar to James City County, and could reduce illegal dumping. Slide, please. So, I understand our report is under review by Grace's team. This presentation that we have gone through represents our work prepared at the direction of the county. And we very much believe in the objective and comprehensive information that we've developed in close coordination with the county, and hope it serves the board well. Next slide. So if the county were to consider consolidation more fully, we've put together some broad steps here on this slide toward implementation of a consolidated systems approach. You've got, of course, step one, decision on consolidation. The next steps include their procedural steps. I'm sure the board council can advise on that. We have step two, consolidation plan, a real plan towards consolidation and implementation. You'd need to do a full cost accounting sort of analysis, a deep analysis to understand the steady incoming revenue to develop and support the planning and implementation of such a system. Step three, implementation. If the county were to operate, there's quite a bit of infrastructure, equipment, personnel, and administration to put in place. We have laid out planning level costs for capital investment with an anticipated timeline of 3 to 5 years. These costs that we've laid out here are the upfront capital investment that the county would need to have in that period, in that 3 to 5 year period, in order to get this implemented. On the other hand, if a contractor did it, you'd have a one contractor contracted out by the county, you'd have a much lower capital investment on this effort. I want to jump back. I think I missed something. I want to jump 2 slides back if I may. I didn't fairly address this. If you go back to the why and why not, we didn't even talk about the right side here. Let's talk about that for a second. I apologize. Did not want to forget that. Why not consolidation? Well, the current system's working. There's high customer satisfaction with the current system. There's higher initial costs for the county if they were to provide this service, and any change is hard. Extensive efforts are required. There's concerns from the citizen. It can just be a big headache. Some of the points related to why not doing that. Okay. If we can jump back down 1 slide below this. Next slide. So thank you for this opportunity to present before you today. We applaud you for your efforts here on the board. It's not easy. You would not be here if you did not care for this community, and therefore it's a pleasure to work with you and work on your behalf. With that, Jennifer and I will available
Questions? All right, I'll lead it off. How many containers is this figured on per household?
If you've got your full county, you've got 29,000.
How many for each household? 1 can, 2 cans?
2 cans, 1 for recycling, 1 for.
So one can for trash, that's basically what I'm asking. Okay, 1 can for trash. And if I want more, then I'm gonna have to pay for that. And so my 30 or 30 some, $20 to $30 is now going up. Cause right now I've got a provider that I pay $24.60 a month. And it's a private hauler, and I have 3 cans. If I put a 4th can out there, they're gonna haul it. And I pay them on a yearly basis. I just pay them 1 year ahead of time. And whatever I have out there, they haul. I mean, great company, great customer service, love them to death. They've been in the community for a long time. They pay taxes here in the community. So that's important too, because one hauler, if they're not in the community, they may be paying taxes in Newport News or Hampton. And we're losing taxes here in James City County by maybe doing something that would run some of our hometown haulers out of the community. So I know that wasn't in the report, and I wouldn't expect it to be in the report, that if we use one hauler outside the community, what tax rate does that, because some of this information you can't get and understand that. So I know that from, the one slide, the somewhat and maybe and on the fence, it goes up to about 47% when you add those percentages together. And I was just adding those together to see, because on the stuff we got back from the community, was basically, to wrap it up in a sentence or two, was, government, keep your nose out of my trash and leave us alone. And I know there were concerns about, the amount of traffic in and out of neighborhoods. I can agree with that, but I think maybe that's something that, maybe the homeowner association should try to control.
In fact,
And
I think maybe mine is like that, because I think we have one trash day.
One
but there's
day?
several different haulers.
Right, and that might
Might be
help some
wrong,
of
but
the,
I think.
homeowners. Let's see if I have anything else. No, great report and good information, and appreciate all the hard work and effort that went into it. I'm gonna turn it over to the rest of the board members. They may have questions, and whoever wants to.
Well, I was just gonna say, you're very lucky, because I pay $28.50 a month, and I only pay $28.50 a month because I get my statement electronically. My father, who, we have a great number of senior citizens in this community who don't do electronic, he's charged $2 additional because he gets a paper statement. Get one can. If you get a second can, you're charged for it. So you're talking a provider that's under 24%, serving under 24% of our citizens. The majority of our citizens are using much larger companies that charge much more, and they charge per can. So,
Let me
and
send
then
you my guy.
neighborhoods, that's great, because you have a mandatory homeowners association.
Yeah.
That's not the majority of our county. And so my neighborhood, for instance, can't demand that, oh, you must get your garbage picked up on Mondays. I mean, it just doesn't work that way.
But Ruth, what's to say if we changed it, that it wouldn't be a requirement for everybody who's required to do a new system have to pay electronically? I'll tell you right now, my husband have if he can't.
No,
write a
I'm not,
check.
I don't know that. I was only speaking though to the $24 that, I mean, as it is now, if we, the county, were to do it, you either can pay JCSA electronically or with the paper bill, the same with the recycling. So I imagine we would probably do the exact same with this. But I mean, for me, the appeal is we get more, the bulk, the thing that concerns me is we have no, after a storm, it's just a deal. Whereas the neighboring county next to us, bulk pickup is part of the deal. You can get it. And I'm very concerned. I have seen some not so safe vehicles that pick up trash. I mean, we have a huge trash problem, and a lot of it's blowing out of the back of people that are picking up trash that don't have a regular hauler. So, I mean, that is it's not necessarily a criticism, it's a concern. So I'm interested in learning more myself. And that's where I am with it. I do appreciate it. I don't know, I think the tough part is, how do you pay for it? Do you up taxes to pay for trash when you might not have everybody that wants to participate in it? Or if you do a charge for service, what do you do if not everybody, kind of going back to the recycling where we have everybody that's not participating? So then that's additional cost. So that's the tough part of it, I think, that you have to work through. So
Is part of the discussion as to whether or not we keep our convenience centers open or not? Because,
Well, no, this is just today is more for our information of the
Right.
study and
but
what
overall, is that going to be part of the
But,
discussion? Because
overall, it would all tie in together because it's all trash related. I
I'm
know
telling
the,
you, we need to keep those open. or we
yeah,
have-
and the 4 million for the one-time hauler, would that be 4 million that they are putting in, or 4 million that, it looked like James City County had to put in 4 million if we had one,
That was private. That's the private investment.
what the private investor would put in. Okay.
that
I
they
just
would
want to
put
make
it in,
sure,
Not us.
if we went with one single provider, we don't put in anything.
Right.
I thought there were some things on our side that if you went with one single provider, are we doing customer service? Are we doing billing? Is it a county? And so if it's a county-run program, then I would think the county would be in it somewhere for at least that piece of it. Or we just let people call whatever the contractor is, which is a decision you could make later, but it won't look like the county doing it if we tell them to call whatever provider we contract with. And so that's something today with recycling, we have a contractor, but we're the customer service piece and we're the billing piece. So our residents are doing business with us. But I think that's a decision you can make later. I don't think it's a $4 million investment for the county to have a contractor, one contractor, but we don't have a utility billing system, we don't have a call center, and we don't have staff to really talk to our citizens that will have more and more issues as people have trash questions, right? Missed pickups, new move in, moves out, those kinds of things. So there is some cost to us, in my opinion, with either model, but those are decisions you could make later as we go through the process if you choose to move forward.
I wanted to ask a little bit about homeowners associations and arrangements that they've already made. I think Kingsmill has a contract with a county waste or GL, whatever it is, name is today. It was originally Reverend Tab when I signed up for it. How does that fit into this? I mean, the expectation would be that homeowners associations would be included in this, even if they already have a mandated single carter. I assume that they would represent a fairly large number of the households out there.
The residents within that HOA would be included, yes. There are single families in those HOA, and it would be the individual residents that would be responsible for how you end up, charging this to them, whether it's on a tax, whether it's some other way. If that becomes the requirement.
So I'm guessing that what that does then is it shifts the responsibility off of the monthly homeowners association fee to a separate bill from the county, is that, or separate pay to the county?
It would lower your HOA fees.
Well, not necessarily.
Nothing
Out
ever
of what
goes
pocket it
down.
comes out, it's still being paid.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you just say, well, you would take those dollars out and put it here, that's one thing. But I guess the other part of that question is, did we get any information about what the cost for those negotiated deals would be? Is that different? I suspect it's different than, me on Mockingbird Drive saying I want to get a carter to take my trash away.
On what kind of deals that they might have.
Yeah, I heard they cut a very sweet deal on recycling, for instance, which cut them out of VIPSA. Yeah.
So do some of them have individual contracts then as the HOA with the service? So how do you break a contract?
Well, we have 3 to 5 year implementation. Presumably the contract's not that long, but.
We have it laid out, the first step is decision to consolidate, and the consolidation plan would then come next, including the billing, a lot of these questions we have to sort out, how's it actually gonna happen, what's on the contractor side, what's on
You want
our
some
side.
council advice on that too?
What if it were to all go through? We have a single provider and all that, and I tell you, I'm not doing it.
Send the sheriff out after you.
Yeah, I'm not doing it. I'm going to the dump like I've done for 40 years. And I'm not participating in this plan at all, period. What are you gonna do?
You're still taking care of your trash, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like paying for school, but not having any kids.
Yeah, but why should I pay it if I'm taking care of my own? I understand it, but
I would
that's
say
the argument I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
And we take care of our kids because that's our future. So if I don't want to participate and I want to take my own trash and I don't want to be involved in this at all, then you're going to still charge me for taking my own trash. See where I'm going?
If you compare it, do you look at trash? Do you look at trash collection? Could you look at it like a utility? you know, how many suppliers supply your water? How many sanitation? How is your wastewater handled? It's one provider.
Septic tank.
Septic tank, in particular, yeah. Yeah, one provider. I didn't know
One
that.
provider, exactly.
You have your own well, too?
Well, too.
So do I.
One
You're
provider.
out of the PSA.
Yes.
So then maybe that's an
That's
issue
what I'm-
to
that's what I'm
discuss in
leading
terms
to.
of the PSA, no PSA.
Yeah.
Because
Is it-
we got the numbers on those,
Yeah.
right? So
Is it, is it a PSA issue? Because in the PSA, we have more of the subdivisions and all. Outside the PSA, you've got another group of people that are strong-willed and go, you know what? I'm doing this. You're not doing it, government. Get out of my house.
Yeah.
So and I can't blame them because I understand where they're thinking. But also, and it's going to take a work session to kind of give us time to go through this and figure out which direction we're going to go and all that.
But I think that the numbers did provide both
Yeah, they did.
inside and outside the PSA, so you can see that
You could see right.
Yeah, it wouldn't change the numbers very much at all. In fact, if you
Not a lot.
included, I was kind of
In the
surprised.
PSA was more
Yeah,
than out
that's
with
right.
the whole thing.
By
everybody's in
a couple of dimes or something
Yeah,
like that. Right.
It's like 40 cent more
Yeah,
if you did the PSA
yeah.
and 40
Yeah.
cent less if you did the entire county.
On the other hand, if you put it into the real estate tax, then it's like every other service that's provided, whether you use it or not, you
Yeah.
pay for it, right? So
So,
that's another issue.
but I know that's
a
one of
different
the arguments we're going to have as far as,
Especially at our end of the county.
yes. And especially when I've got a provider that I got 3 cans at a good rate and,
Right.
and now all of a sudden you're going to tell me that I'm going to pay this for 1 and for 2 I'm going to pay this. And if 3 I'm going to pay this. I'm going to be like, you done lost your mind. And I don't,
But 23% of the people are doing that. The majority is not doing that. I think that's something we have to keep in our, I mean, I understand, I'm not discounting the 23%, 24%, but we got to remember that over 76% are
out of the survey,
doing that.
right?
Probably
Survey, which is representative of the,
The whole thing.
of the-
Actual
The
collections.
community.
Of the whole, it's the Market Research Association in terms of statistical significance, we're 4.8.
So that percentage is actual being picked up today. That's 76%, or that's an estimated.
That's of the survey respondents, 3/4 of the survey respondents were picked up by those 3 companies.
So even-
3/4 of the respondents of the 400 people in the survey.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're talking about 400 people compared to 78,000, which really
The
is
400
changing that
Right.
queue.
But
It may not be 25%.
the survey is designed to be representative
Right,
of the whole.
right. And my bank account is the same way.
But even, let's take the hypothetical person who's putting out 4 garbage cans at $24 a month, did you say?
$24.60.
Right. That's just to haul away your garbage. Then if that hypothetical person is putting out recycling, that's another $7 a month, which means $31. And then if you want bulk pickup or storm debris pickup, that would presumably be an additional cost. Now, you might just throw it in your truck, but the hypothetical person might actually have to pay for that kind of service. So, it is a more complicated calculation than that, I think.
It's tough.
Yeah, and
One of the things you can do on a consolidated plan is that we've worked with other communities on this in terms of if it is a contracted service, you can provide a maximum amount of opt-outs. I
Yep.
mean, we modeled this that everybody was all
Right,
in.
right.
Okay, we modeled it that everybody was all in. In the actuality, if you went forward and you wanted to get a plan, you could have a maximum amount of people that would opt out, so the county would guarantee this number of, so they're not, estimating 5% of the people opt out, but actually 20 do, you provide a floor for that. So that's a way you can, if you think about it, if you went down the path, there are ways you can deal with opt-outs, although we did not model opt-outs, so just.
Right.
so just a couple of things to think about in refining this excellent report, which I think was very, very helpful in understanding a lot of these issues. One would be the question of the homeowners associations that have contracts already with Carters. Second would be in terms of you know, the dislocation of small businesses that have been contributors to the county over the years, and
Maybe the tax, like what he was talking about.
Well, right, right.
What kind of tax loss might we incur if it's somebody outside of the county?
a third factor that you know, I had somebody expressed to me just the other day when seeing that this was on our agenda for today was, and this is a really interesting issue, because I can't tell you how many people tell me, "Oh yeah, that would be great," and it's not because they're dissatisfied with service. You know, that it often just is that they have a unified sense of what's happening. Maybe they are the minority who care about the trucks coming through the neighborhood and so forth. But you know, some of those carters, and I think it's primarily the ones that you know, will pick up as many containers as you put out, also do backyard pickup or side yard pickup as opposed to curbside. So for a population that may include a significant number of older people, that sometimes is seen as a real benefit. But then on the benefits of this, one of the benefits that is significant from my perspective is that if you are providing a county service universally, then you can control open burning. Is that right, Mr. Kinsman? I think Mr. Kinsman here. Yeah. So, which we're not able to do in our residentially zoned neighborhoods now, in the same way, but we could do with when we're providing the service.
I might just make a point to your point about the small business. There are other entities that have done small business set-asides. You know, you could do a small business set-aside.
I'd be very interested in looking at that.
Federal government does it, state does it. You could do a small business set-aside if you want.
And it could be partnership for the non-curb service, like you're saying. Gas only pickup. We talked about a number of.
Electronics pickup.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd be worried, we're just getting a convenience center underway in that process down the Grove area, which John's worked very hard to, because it's a long way for anybody to come out of the Grove area to come across the county. And, you know, our convenience centers, a lot of people use those convenience centers and they enjoy the convenience. And the one up in John's area will help a lot too, and it keeps trash off the road. I know years ago, before we started this transfer station, all that, when we owned our own dump and we took care of that and everything else, the contractors paid for the trash and the homeowners didn't pay for anything. And if you came and dropped your trash off there, it didn't cost you a thing. When we went to the convenience center, it's going to be better. It's going to work out better. You're going to love it. It's not going to cost you anything. And then the fire department we had a firefighter selling tickets, and you couldn't get tickets, and you punch a ticket. It's one bag, 2 tickets, or 3 bags. And it depends on who you were talking to, how many bags each ticket was. And it was crazy that we were selling tickets and all that. The Jolly Pond facility ought to be open and free to the citizens. And we ought to look at, for bulk pickup, charging $25. My thought as we start negotiating and talk about what we want to do is get another knuckle truck in James City County and say, if you have bulk trash, we can handle that. We don't necessarily want to handle all of it. But for bulk trash, we can be in your neighborhood and pick up bulk trash for $25. And we'll come in there and take the knuckle truck, pick all the debris and limbs and whatever you want to cut out of your yard, because we're still going to have to deal with that in the county. We're getting up trash that comes out of the grocery store, basically, we're talking about. We're not talking about the neighbors who are cutting their trees and bushes, and now they're, you know, I know you've got it in there as far as that, but, you know, how much is that? How many times can I get it? How often can I get it? And some people may, you know, love their gardens and bushes and all that, and they're trimming all the time. Others let it grow up and look like a jungle around the house. They're never going to cut anything, so they wouldn't need it. So that's my 2 cents for our meeting when we meet about this. Have we beat this one? Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions. When we look compared to compared to our neighboring jurisdictions, the city of Hampton, city of Newport News. I know the city of Newport News does theirs totally in-house. and I believe they do everything. If memory serves me correctly, when I lived down there, I think it was mandatory. So you lived in the city of Newport News, you had to have your trash picked up by the city, and they charged you a certain amount for it and everything. How is that, do we know how that is compared in Hampton, York County, and the city of Williamsburg? I believe all of them have some sort of consolidated or mandatory either contracted or county run. I'm trying to figure out,
Was outside of.
So I can speak to York.
okay,
That's an enterprise fund that's the quote that we gave you on. That doesn't reflect their cost. There's trash piece was that you get the pickup, but not as many convenience centers.
okay. Are they contracted out to one particular company? Okay.
And you have to do it. Nobody can opt out?
It's
I'm got a line for
Because
that.
because the upper part of York County is fairly rural, and I was
Yeah.
just curious as to how they handled that compared to us. Maybe
Grace knows.
opt in.
York is opt-in. Okay, that's good. And the city of Williamsburg, I think, does, I don't know whether theirs is contracted or in-house or not.
We did not look at Williamsburg specifically.
All right. I was just curious because, I started out here in my homeowners association with BFI Republic, and when they got to be over $30 or $32 a month just for trash, I went and found another one. And what our HOA did was our HOA went out and did not a short-term one-year deal. If you go with this one, it's so much a month. Well, I went over to County Waste for $16 a month. Nice savings. Well, $16 a month is now $23.75 this month, plus the $7 I do. So, it keeps edging up and edging up and edging up. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have small markets. It's segmented, and they're gonna keep adding a couple of bucks every month if they can. Whereas if you have some sort of a program that is countywide and it's a fixed rate, I think what you were indicating is that the figures you've given us don't necessarily indicate what could be negotiated. It's what sort of is based upon costs, so that figure, if you're talking about 23 to 25 plus the 7, about $30, could be considerably less if you had a particular large contractor or whatever that got, whichever contractor got the whole thing. So that I think that's the frustration for a lot of folks, is that it's a floating crap game right now on what you pay, as indicated by the differences of what people up here pay. I'm not terribly dissatisfied, but I think it could be better. I like the idea of going ahead and looking at this at least. Some good points that have been raised about whether we want to make it. I think in order for it to be truly effective, it has to be mandatory. Now, the question of whether it's mandatory just inside the PSA or not, I think is a good question to debate going forward. And I think one of the concerns, I really like the idea of keeping the convenience centers open. But one of the things I like is, if you look at this, I think this is something that would give us an opportunity to drive the cost down to where I think it would have an impact on illegal dumping. We have a lot of problems right now with illegal dumping.
That's why I suggested to keep the landfill and make it free.
Yep.
Because when it was free before, we didn't. But the minute we went with that transfer station and shut it down, people, they were throwing mattresses, box spring, anything they could, because I'm not gonna pay that. And, so I'm thinking that would too help with,
So you can afford a free mattress, but you can't afford to pay at a convenience center? I mean, I'm sorry. We're making excuses for people dumping trash.
But anyway, I think it's worth continuing and taking a look at the study. I think there are a lot of areas we're gonna have to really wrestle with, what the impacts would be. And I'm sensitive to the small companies and set-asides. You know, I think that's something that we should, maybe really consider. But overall, I think this has given us a step where I think we need to take the next step and start taking a closer look at it and get into the details a little more.
are working on it. Yeah. It'll be a work session. Thank you, sir. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it very much.
Chairman, thank you, board members. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next is building consolidation study. Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I don't have a lot to share other than we've talked some about the government center and the idea of what these buildings might have in cost savings if we were to do some other type of facility, and a step in that is a consolidation study. It is something less than, I think, $50,000, but I didn't want to embark on that kind of study without at least a consensus of the board that you're okay with me gathering that information for you to have at a future time. And it's probably a month or 2 or 3 for us to get that, and my hope was to have it as a topic in the January, February timeframe, that we would be able to pull some pieces together and be able to talk more about the future of where the government center might fit, whether it's here or elsewhere. Any concerns with me proceeding with trying to get that information for you before we get into a January or February timeframe?
So this would be a study that you would contract out to basically get that information, come back to a work session for us to then have a little further discussion.
Just another piece of the overall thing, and again, we have a lot of the reports about maintenance and future needs and cost and those things, as well as some efficiencies of less doors in a building, so to speak, and I think it would be good information for us to have. We've talked about it being real, but I don't know what order of magnitude it is, and I think that study would give us a much better basis for making decisions going forward.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the second piece I had is we had talked about this ARPA form. I've passed this out again. It is all the same projects minus one addition that is on the back. In response to Ms. Larson's comment about could we do something more tourism related, I did come back and talk about some items that would help any of our facilities. Some of these, the Ambler in particular, about $450,000 would allow us to go ahead and put the underground electric into Amblers that we're going to need in the future anyhow, but in the interim, we could have electric outlets there versus folks having to bring a generator on site. That would help in terms of use of the facilities outside of the building and then inside the building at some future date. We talked about some landscaping around and not necessarily flowers that have to be tended to daily, although they could be that. But my intent with this $50,000 was really looking at bushes and shrubbery that is something that would be attractive, but we could implement that would have a more, I say robust or lasting impact. It would still take some manpower to maintain it, but it wouldn't be daily or weekly manicuring for that. But it would make the site easier to be presentable when folks are doing weddings or other events there. The purchase of portable bathrooms, we rent a lot of porta-johns, and I don't want to say it would offset the cost of porta-john rental, but we would use these in a lot of places, from our Jamestown Jams to events in our parks, to events at the Ambler House or otherwise. Having the restrooms that have lights in them, have running water, heating and cooling, and the cost of a portable bathroom is somewhere in the $75,000 range. And then a use of the ARPA funding that has certainly been deemed as a reasonable use for tourism-related activities as a stage. And I can tell you, if we had a stage, we would use it frequently. We rent tents and other stage type equipment, but if we had it, we would use it for more events within our parks, and I think it would be of benefit to the community. So that's the only addition to the ARPA funding, and to come up with that 450, I reduced some of the an unknown project in terms of specifics today. It was a blue one on the front, the marina infrastructure support. I reduced that by amount to equal our ARPA funding so that we would still have it there as a placeholder and something to come back to as we have an outside entity potentially interested in some development there, and this would support parking and other infrastructure costs, but I don't have an absolute project to move forward with that yet. So with that, the items in green, I was hopeful maybe the board was comfortable with us moving forward. If you're comfortable with all the items, so be it, but the ones in green represent just over $7 million of our funding, and that would let us proceed. It saves the other balance of approximately $9 million until we get further into the spring or a later time.
Everybody okay with
So this is the
entire list?
so you're talking about going ahead with the green ones, and then the blue ones were,
The light colored ones, at their last meeting, we said we're okay, so and then the green ones would be helpful to move forward with, and then the darker blue ones, really, there's not an urgent part in the next 3 to 6 months for me. We'd probably come back in late winter, early spring with permission to move forward with those at that time.
okay, so you have a couple of darker blue ones that already have money set aside for recommended funding, but on the front page, but not on the back. Is that correct?
Correct. On the front page, that money, we would say, if we were going to do them, we'd recommend the ARPA funding for that. On the back, the dark blue, outside, once you get beyond Lower County Park, all the dark blue there were other future CIP or general fund savings as they occur through the year. Many of those would get funded. Some of those may or may not, depending on how our general fund savings fall out this year, and then they'd move into a future CIP. So,
And we haven't, this is the ARPA, is this the total ARPA funding, or is this the first tranche?
what I've totaled for you on the ARPA column in terms of recommended funding does total the 14.8 million, which is the total. And that recommended funding column is showing you the ARPA project, which is really the first page and then the first 5 of the second page.
Okay.
But they do total.
I'm saying that's the total ARPA funding we're gonna get for the whole time.
Yes, sir.
And we have until 2024?
2024 to get it obligated, 2026 to get it spent. So if we had a contract in 2024 that was going to build something over the next year and a half, that would be acceptable as well.
So we basically, this is an incremental bite at the first bit of it, and then we'll keep working.
Yes, sir. If you're comfortable with the entire list we've got there for ARPA, then I'm happy to take it at that rate. I just wasn't trying to push you too hard, and we don't have that second 7.4 million, so I can't do much with that until we receive that money, which we expect in May.
I was gonna say, you only have about half of it right now.
Yes,
The other
sir.
half comes in May of next year, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I was spending.
I'd move to endorse the list and ask that you simply come back with a progress report on things at a later point.
That works for us. If the board's comfortable with that, you'll be involved in a lot of these as we go along as well, so.
We need a motion for that?
Yeah,
That'd be
I
helpful.
just did.
Okay, got a motion. Roll call, please, sir.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Ripple?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. We've added board. Oh, well, a minute, hold on. Which one do you have? Oh, okay, yeah.
I would, before we move on, I would like to make a comment, is that I did receive an email from a constituent about the ARPA funding and everything. And the question was asked about citizen recommendations that we might want to consider. And my response is going to be basically that I would ask them to forward that to the county administrator for review and possible inclusion.
And with that, we'll talk on our side, but it might be a very good community meeting just to talk about where we are and how we got there, and see if there's something we're missing. But I think there's been enough, it's been talked about, but I certainly think having some better conversation with those interested would be helpful as well, so.
Very good.
I kind of think it's necessary because communities around us have involved the public in this discussion. So I think if there's a way to bring in and get additional comment,
Sure.
I would suggest we do that.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Condition to consider the amendment of the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance to provide additional requirements to protect and preserve scenic roadways such as Forge Road. Mr. Holt, Paul. how you doing,
Thank
sir?
you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good afternoon. On October the 26th of this year, the Board of Supervisors adopted the James City County 2045 Comprehensive Plan. At the request of a supervisor, staff has prepared the initiating resolution found in your agenda packets to consider possible amendments to the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance to provide additional requirements to protect and preserve scenic roadways, such as Forge Road. Purpose of such amendments would be to implement goal, strategy, and action number Land Use 6.3, which states that to help retain the character of rural lands, develop additional zoning and subdivision tools, some of which could include scenic easement dedication requirements, increased minimum lot sizes, increased setbacks and/or overlay districts, all with the purpose of protecting and preserving scenic roadways. Staff recommends approval of the initiating resolution, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
How long do you think it would take for after the initiating resolution for the development and this to basically percolate and come back to us?
That's a really good question. I don't have a timeline for you tonight. Staff will be actively working on that. We could get back with you soon.
Move the initiating.
All right. Roll call, please, sir.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next, authorization for a full-time position in real estate assessment. Susan Day, how you doing, ma'am?
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. In 2008, 2 positions in the real estate division were eliminated due to the housing market crash and the economic downturn. One of those eliminated positions was the Deputy Director of the Real Estate Assessment Division, whose duties included supervision of staff, residential assessments, and performing the bulk of the commercial assessments. When that position was eliminated, the position's residential parcels were shifted to the remaining appraisers, in which we have 4, and the supervision duties and commercial assessments shifted to the Director of Real Estate. These changes resulted in a much higher workload on staff, and the county was left with only 1 position performing the bulk of the commercial assessments. Today, the department staffing level is still down, those 2 positions, and the number of real estate parcels has grown substantially over the past 15 years. James City County performs biennial reassessments, and the next reassessment is underway, which will be effective for January 1st of 2022. To manage the workload and to ensure proper review and oversight, the Department of Financial Management Services is seeking approval to reestablish the Deputy Director of Real Estate. The estimated cost for the remainder of fiscal year 22 is $75,000, which would be funded by savings in the general fund. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't really have a question. I think it's justified. I have concerns that I've shared with Mr. Stevens about the real estate assessments. I want to make sure they're done fairly, accurately. So I'm hopeful that by making sure we have enough people in that position, I know you're working towards a solution that this will help that. So if there's no other, I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Roll call, please, sir.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right,
Thank you.
board requests and directives.
Well, I would like to start by wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving. I don't know about y'all, but I got some turkey stuff waiting on me at home. But with that, I would also like to offer congratulations to Supervisor Larson for her recently being elected as, I believe it's 2nd Vice President to VACO. So we're being well represented there, and congratulations on your achievement. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
I would like to extend my congratulations to Ms. Larson as well. I know that's a very well-earned position, and thank you for taking it on. I do want to say impressive to Adam Kinsman for being one of the 15 under 50. I told him I'm waiting next year for, 5 under 80. Maybe I'll qualify, we'll see. I did want to say that the Chamber has done, through the Military Affairs Committee, has worked very closely with our 2 installations in York County, the Coast Guard Station and the Naval Weapons Center. And we are doing grants for junior enlisted to have them have spending cash to help them get home for Christmas, $300 per person. They have to go through an application process, and we are actually going to do the award of those in person this year, and on the 10th. I think we're going to do at 10:30 over at the Coast Guard Station and at noon at the Naval Weapons Station. So I'll give you an update on that at our next board meeting. But it looks like we may have we were very successful in the amount of money we were able to raise, and I think we're going to be able to accommodate all the young folks who have applied for it. So, and then finally, I did want to pass my sincere thanks and congratulations to county staff. Mr. Stevens, make sure Parks and Rec and all of the folks involved are aware that two members of my household, Cody and Charlie, wholeheartedly approve of the new dog park. It's lab tested and lab approved. And we've been over there literally every day all this last week, and it is a resounding success, not only with the pets, but with the owners. And so I'm looking forward to having it finally finished and formally opened. And I think we need to consider, for other areas of the county as well, because this is a tremendously great site for a lot of folks. But the folks in the other ends of the counties could benefit from that as well. So, job well done. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So I'll be very quick. I just wanted to do a little bit of reporting on VACO, the conference, and Mr. Eisenhower, Mr. McLennan, Mr. Reinheimer, and Mr. Stevens, and I went. And so just talk a little bit about what I attended. The Economic Steering Committee, we heard from Chris Thompson, who's the Director of Strategic Housing, and he did make a point of coming over and talking with me to let me know that he's working with Vaughn very closely on some ideas for affordable housing. And also, we attended VACO and VSBA have entered into a collaborative leadership program to help strengthen the relationships between school boards and board of supervisors. And then Mr. Stevens and I served on a panel last Thursday at the VSBA conference about the same thing. The one that we attended at VACO had the Chesterfield County on. Then attended the K-12 education funds and initiatives. That one was a little trickier just because it's the old administration, or not the old, but the current administration, and they didn't even want to speak to what could be coming down the pike in the new administration. So they did say that they are trying to work very closely together in the transition, that Governor Northam has said, make this transition as smooth as possible. But the one thing I did feel kind of ironic that they talked about, the tremendous amount of pressure that the students have been under, that the teachers have been under, because a lot that was talked about VACO was the fact that the teaching profession is almost in a crisis situation for people leaving and not as many people going into and that type of thing. So that's a great concern to many people. And then they talked about the 2 new benchmarks they added this year, which just adds additional pressure to both students and teachers. I understand you have to know where someone is and see where they go, but maybe we let that go for a year just to get, back to, but anyway, I thought that was kind of ironic. Then we also had went to a really good one about tax policy and state budget priorities with Delegate Vivian Watts and Senator Emmett Hanger. And that was really good. And they talked a lot about different tax reform that especially Vivian Watts has been trying to do for a long time. And so, then just talked about their priorities and things like that, but they also took a lot of questions. So I thought it was really one of the best VACO conferences that they've done, in my personal opinion. And so that's that. And that's happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Let me just take the opportunity to congratulate Ms. Larson.
Oh, thank you.
But this time on her graduation or its completion
you.
of the Board of Supervisors certification program sponsored by VACO. So,
Thank you. And I thank the county for the support on that. That was an 18-month program. They're now going to go to a year, wimps, but
You wore them down.
I guess so. Sorry.
How did you do on the benchmark?
Yeah.
But I also wanted to just mention, as Ms. Larson said, I attended the VACO meeting and also conducted a meeting of the Coalition of High Growth Communities at that meeting, which was well attended by a number of our fellow fast-growing communities across the Commonwealth. And I had the good fortune to visit with the police department in the Stuff the Cruiser event for Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago, and just wanted to highlight the fact that hope our citizens have been watching the announcements that we have another Stuff the Cruiser event coming up for children's toys in December at a Target event. I'm not sure the date of the 4th? December 4th, Saturday, December 4th, at the Target parking lot.
The one on Monticello, I
right.
assume.
So if you are looking for a way to help make Christmas a little brighter for a young child in the community who otherwise might not be able to receive presents, that would be a good opportunity.
Do they
to do
buy is it a new toy unwrapped? How's that work? Moms
Asking
like
me
to know those things.
too
I
many
imagine
questions.
it's probably a new
Yeah, new
unwrapped.
toy.
New
Right,
unwrapped
right,
toy?
which you can buy at Target, presumably.
Yeah, going to
That works out.
Oh, right, I understand that.
They were joking.
I was just being.
But they are a James City County taxpayer.
That's right. That's right.
And they'll be, y'all will be out there
and it's just
for
another
an extended
indication of
period of
the-
time?
I'm sorry?
That's all right, go ahead, carry on.
Okay.
I'd just
so,
like to know these
so those are the only announcements I had. I just wanted to make sure we drew attention to the good work that our police department is doing in their time off.
Supervisor Larson, congratulations, twice over.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work. I know you will. And I don't have anything else but happy Thanksgiving. And I'll turn it over to the county administrator for his report.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I don't have anything to report either other than to just wish everybody a safe and happy Thanksgiving. So I'll pass on that as well.
John, you want to lead us off on the non-closed session?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We were slated to have a closed session for appointments to boards and commissions, but since we have recommendations and all the individuals, and I've talked individually with each board member, we will do this in public session. So I would move that we appoint Ted Hansen to the Historic Triangle Bicycle Advisory Committee for a 3-year term, which would expire on December 31st of 2024. That we appoint Henry Wells to the Social Services Advisory Board to a term that would expire on September 30th, 2025. That we would appoint to the Colonial Juvenile Services Commission Ronnie Davis for a term expiring on June 30th, 2023. That we recommend to the circuit court judge that they reappoint. Did I not write down that name?
Michael Berry.
Thank you, Michael Berry, to a term that would expire on December 31st of 2024, and that we appoint Heath Richardson, formerly of our Planning Commission, to the Clean County Commission for a term that would expire on July 31st, 2023.
Roll call, please.
Sir, Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next I'll need adjournment until 5 p.m. on December 14th, 2021 for our regular meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned. Roll call, please, sir.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Motion carries.